The moment Isabel Rowan's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering across the marble ballroom floor, every executive in Chicago held their breath. The woman who'd built empires with a single glare was about to fall, literally. But it wasn't her assistant who caught her. It wasn't her bodyguard. It was the quiet single father from logistics, the man who'd sworn never to touch alcohol again. And what happened next would change both their lives forever. Stay with me until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Crystal Ballroom of the Drake Hotel had seen its share of Chicago's elite, but tonight it practically trembled under the weight of so much concentrated power and ambition. Chandeliers dripped from the vaulted ceiling like frozen waterfalls, each crystal catching and fracturing the light into 1,000 dancing fragments. The November chill pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside, the heat of 300 bodies dressed in their finest created a humid atmosphere thick with expensive perfume, aged whiskey, and barely concealed desperation. Ethan Cole stood at the periphery of it all, a shadow in a rented tuxedo that pulled slightly across his shoulders. He'd lost weight since his wife died, but apparently not enough to drop a size. His fingers wrapped around a glass of sparkling water with a twist of lime, the same drink he'd been nursing for the past 2 hours. To the casual observer, the glass might have contained champagne or vodka tonic. That was the point. That, at events like these, not drinking marked you as either recovering or self-righteous. And Ethan had learned years ago that it was easier to blend in than to explain. He'd been explaining for 5 years now. 5 years since Sarah. 5 years since a drunk driver had run a red light on a Tuesday afternoon and turned his world into before and after. 5 years of raising Maddie alone, of being both mother and father, of waking up at 2 a.m. to nightmares, hers and his own. "Mr. Cole, isn't it?" A voice cut through his reverie. Marcus Chen from accounting, already 3 drinks deep based on the gloss in his eyes. "Didn't expect to see you at one of these things. Logistics, right?" "That's right." Ethan managed a polite smile. The company was generous with invitations this year. Translation, they needed to fill seats. Marcus laughed too loudly, champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim of his flute. "No offense, man, but this crowd, they measure your worth by your proximity to the throne. And our queen," he gestured grandly across the ballroom, "she who must be obeyed." Ethan didn't need to follow the gesture to know who Marcus meant. Everyone at Rowan Industries knew exactly where Isabel Rowan was at any given moment. Her presence was like a gravitational field, impossible to ignore. Even now, he could feel the subtle shift in the room's energy. The way conversations adjusted their volume and trajectory based on her movements through the crowd. He'd only met her twice. Once during his initial interview 3 years ago, a perfunctory 5 minutes where her assistant had done most of the talking while Isabel's ice-blue eyes had scanned his resume with the efficiency of a computer processing data. The second time had been in an elevator 6 months later. She'd stepped in at the executive floor, and for 37 seconds of descent, he'd stood ramrod straight while she'd made a phone call in what he was pretty sure was French, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, even in a language he didn't understand. Both times, he'd thought the same thing. This was a woman who'd learned to turn herself into a weapon. "Careful." Marcus was still talking, swaying slightly. "Don't stare too long. She's like Medusa. One look and you turn to stone. Or in some cases," he lowered his voice conspiratorially, "you just turn into a yes man. This company's full of them." Before Ethan could respond, a sudden swell in the crowd's volume drew their attention. The live band, some jazz ensemble that probably cost more than Ethan's annual salary, shifted from background ambience to something with more punch. The dance floor, previously occupied by the brave or the drunk, suddenly became the room's focal point. And there she was. Isabel Rowan moved through the crowd like wildfire through dry grass, beautiful, dangerous, impossible to look away from. She wore a dress the color of fresh blood, cut with such precision that it seemed less like fabric and more like armor. Her dark hair, usually pulled back in a severe bun, fell in waves past her shoulders. Diamond earrings caught the light with every turn of her head, and her smile, that carefully calibrated expression she wore at these events, never quite reached her eyes. She was 42, though she could have passed for 35. The business magazines loved to profile her, The Iron Lady of Chicago, the woman who built an empire, breaking the glass ceiling and reshaping the pieces into a crown. 10 years ago, she'd inherited a struggling mid-sized logistics company from her father. Today, Rowan Industries had offices in 17 countries, an valuation that made shareholders weep with joy. Everyone wanted something from her. Everyone wanted to be near her, and from where Ethan stood, it looked exhausting. "She's had a lot to drink tonight," Marcus observed, his tone shifting from mockery to something almost concerned. "More than usual." Ethan frowned. "How do you know what's usual?" "These things happen every quarter. Same circus, different costumes. She usually nurses one glass of wine all night, strictly for show. But tonight?" Marcus counted on his fingers. "I've seen her with at least 4 glasses of champagne. Maybe 5. That was unusual. Ethan had done enough research on his CEO to know that control was her religion. Isabel Rowan didn't do anything without calculation, without purpose. Even her laughter, and he could hear it now, ringing across the ballroom, sounded rehearsed, a performance of enjoyment rather than the real thing. "Maybe she's celebrating something," Ethan suggested, "or drowning something." Marcus finished his champagne and immediately snagged another from a passing waiter. Word is the Tokyo expansion hit some snags. Legal trouble, cultural barriers, the usual international headaches, could be pressure from the board, could be... "Marcus, with all due respect, we probably shouldn't speculate about the boss's personal life." Right, Mr. By the Book." But Marcus's smile was friendly enough. "That's probably why you're good at your job, Cole." "Me? I'm just counting down to retirement and trying not to care too much." He clapped Ethan on the shoulder and wandered off toward a group of similarly buzzed colleagues. Ethan returned his attention to his water glass, to the safety of the periphery. This wasn't his world. These people, with their easy laughter and casual networking, their second homes and their children in private schools, they spoke a language he'd never quite learned. His world was Maddie's parent-teacher conferences and grocery shopping on a budget, fixing the washing machine himself because calling a repairman wasn't in the cards, and lying awake at night wondering if he was screwing up this single-parent thing beyond repair. The music swelled. More people flooded the dance floor. The energy in the room ratcheted higher, that peculiar fevered quality that came when successful people drank too much and remembered they were mortal after all. And then he saw it. The stumble. It was slight, just a small catch in Isabel's step as she turned from a conversation with someone who looked important and expensive. Her hand reached out, grasping for the back of a chair that was 6 inches farther away than she'd calculated. For just a moment, the mask slipped. Her eyes went wide with something that looked uncomfortably like fear. She recovered quickly. Of course she did. Isabel Rowan didn't fall, didn't falter, didn't show weakness. She straightened, smiled, said something that made her companion laugh. But Ethan had seen it, that moment of genuine vulnerability, of the human underneath the armor. Around him, the crowd churned on, oblivious, or perhaps not oblivious, perhaps they'd simply learned not to see. To acknowledge Isabel Rowan's weakness would be to admit that empires could crumble, that control was an illusion, that any of them could fall. Ethan knew about falling. He'd learned its physics the hard way. The night stretched on. Ethan found himself tracking Isabel's progress through the ballroom with growing unease. Another glass of champagne appeared in her hand, then another. Her laughter grew louder, her gestures more expansive. The people around her laughed along, encouraged her, offered her drinks. Of course they did. She was the sun they orbited. They'd burn up before they'd tell her to slow down. Having fun. A woman appeared at Ethan's elbow, Diane something, from HR. She had kind eyes and graying hair she didn't bother to dye. "It's a beautiful event," Ethan replied diplomatically. "That's not what I asked." She smiled. "You've been standing in the same spot for 45 minutes, watching the crowd like you're studying for a test. Just not much of a party person." "Me neither." Diane sipped her wine, her first glass, Ethan noticed, barely touched. "I come to these things because it's expected, put in my time, then go home to my cats and my audiobooks. No judgment here." She paused. "Your daughter's what, 8 now?" 9 next month. Time flies. I remember when you brought her to the holiday party 2 years ago. Sweet kid. She told me all about her science project on volcanoes. Ethan couldn't help but smile at the memory. She made the eruption too powerful, ended up with baking soda foam all over the kitchen ceiling. That's the best kind of science project. Diane's expression turned more serious. How are you both doing? Really doing? The question caught him off guard. People asked how he was doing all the time, but rarely did they seem to actually want the answer. We're okay. Good days and hard days, but we're figuring it out. Sarah was a wonderful woman. I didn't know her well, but I remember meeting her at a company picnic once. She made everyone feel like they mattered. Something tight formed in Ethan's chest. 5 years, and certain memories could still ambush him. Sarah at that picnic, 8 months pregnant with Maddie, laughing as she tried to hit a softball and nearly fell over backward. The way she'd looked at him, eyes bright with joy and mischief and love. Yeah, he managed. She did. The world needs more people like that. Diane touched his arm gently. People who see others, really see them. She glanced across the ballroom. Especially in places like this where everyone's so busy performing their success that they forget to be human. Before Ethan could respond, a commotion rippled through the crowd. Not loud, not dramatic, just a subtle shift in energy that made people turn and whisper. Near the ballroom's French doors leading to the balcony, Isabel Rowan had stopped walking. She stood very still, one hand pressed against the wall, her face pale under the chandelier light. Her assistant, Jessica, appeared at her elbow, speaking urgently in her ear. Isabel waved her away with a gesture that was probably meant to be dismissive but came across as desperate. The assistant persisted. Isabel's expression flickered between anger and something that looked dangerously close to panic. "Oh dear," Diane murmured. "That's not good." The crowd was starting to notice now. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Eyes turned. In a room full of predators, weakness drew attention like blood in water. Ethan could practically see the gossip forming, the narratives being constructed. Did you see Isabel Rowan? Completely drunk. Lost control. Maybe the pressure finally got to her. Maybe she's not as iron as everyone thinks. By tomorrow, this would be in every industry publication. CEO's public intoxication raises questions about leadership. Isabel pushed away from the wall, took 3 steps toward the French doors, and her knees buckled. Several things happened simultaneously. Her assistant lunged forward but was too slow. 2 board members nearby froze, clearly calculating whether helping would be good optics or if association with the moment would taint them. The music kept playing. The band hadn't noticed the drama unfolding 20 feet away. And Ethan moved. He didn't think about it, didn't calculate the optics or the consequences, or what it might mean to cross the invisible lines that separated logistics managers from CEOs. He just moved, covering the distance between them in long strides, his water glass abandoned on a nearby table. He reached her just as she started to fall. His arm caught her around the waist, taking her weight, steadying her. She was lighter than he'd expected and trembling like a wire pulled too tight. This close, he could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral that made him think of gardens he'd never visited, mixed with the sharp sweetness of champagne. "I've got you," he said quietly, meant only for her ears. "You're okay." Isabel's head turned, her eyes struggling to focus on his face. For a moment, she looked at him without recognition. Then something clicked. "Cole," she slurred slightly. "Logistics? Yes, ma'am. I don't need—" She tried to straighten, to pull away, but her body wasn't cooperating with her commands. "I'm fine. You need to sit down." He kept his voice level, gentle. "There's a chair right here." But sitting down meant staying in the ballroom, meant everyone continuing to watch and whisper. He could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on them, the phones that were probably already recording. By morning, this would be everywhere. Her assistant finally reached them, her face tight with worry and calculation. "Ms. Rowan, let me get you upstairs. I'll call your driver." "Where's James?" Isabel interrupted, naming her regular chauffeur. "He left an hour ago. He wasn't scheduled to stay all evening. I can call a car service." "No." The word came out sharp, cutting. "No services, no drivers, no—" She swayed again, and Ethan tightened his grip to keep her upright. "No witnesses." The assistant's professional mask cracked slightly. I'm sorry, Ms. Rowan. I don't know what you want me to do. Just go, Isabel said, and now her voice carried more exhaustion than anger. Everyone go. I'll handle it. But that's an order, Jennifer. Jennifer. Ethan had been close. The assistant looked like she wanted to argue, but years of conditioning won out. You didn't disobey direct orders from Isabel Rowan, no matter how obviously bad an idea those orders were. She backed away, phone already in hand, probably texting someone. The board, the PR team, someone who got paid to manage disasters. The crowd was closing in now, a tightening circle of concern that felt more like curiosity. Ethan could hear the murmurs. Is she all right? Should we call someone? I've never seen her like this. Who is that guy helping her? Isabel must have heard it too because she stiffened in his grip. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Get me out of here. Okay, Ethan said. Can you walk? I think so, just... She took a shaky breath. Don't let me fall. I won't. They moved together toward the ballroom's exit, Ethan supporting most of her weight while trying to make it look natural, like they were just two colleagues leaving a party. Every step felt like walking through spotlight beams. He was acutely aware of the rumors he was creating just by touching her, by being this close, by being the person who'd stepped forward when everyone else had stepped back. Tomorrow, everyone would want to know, who was that man? What's his connection to Isabel Rowan? Is there something going on there? Tomorrow didn't matter. Right now, there was just the hallway, blessedly empty and quiet after the cacophony of the ballroom. The muffled music faded behind them as they walked, Isabel's designer heels clicking unevenly on the marble floor. Where's your room? Ethan asked. Don't have one. I live 20 minutes north. Her words came clearer now, away from the crowd, as if embarrassment had a sobering effect. My car is gone, and you're in no condition to drive anyway. I wasn't going to drive, her tone carried an edge of indignation. I'm drunk, not stupid. I know. They'd reached the hotel's grand lobby now. A few people milled about, late arrivals, early leavers, hotel guests heading to the bar. Ethan steered them toward a sitting area tucked behind a marble column, away from curious eyes. Sit here for a minute. Isabel sank into a leather armchair like her bones had turned to liquid. She closed her eyes, one hand pressed to her forehead. This is humiliating. It's human. Same thing. Her eyes opened, fixing on him with more focus than before. The ice blue that intimidated entire boardrooms now looked bruised, exhausted. Why are you helping me? It was a good question. Ethan thought about the distance between their worlds, about how he'd probably just committed career suicide by making himself part of her story, about how he should call someone, Jennifer, the board, hotel security, anyone, and let them handle this. But then he thought about Sarah, about finding her car wrapped around a telephone pole, about the police officer who'd told him the other driver had blown 3 times the legal limit, about the rage and grief that had consumed him for months after, the way he'd wanted to find that man and make him hurt the way Ethan was hurting. He'd found him eventually, in prison, serving a 15-year sentence. James Duval, 34, father of 2, a functioning alcoholic who'd made one terrible decision and destroyed multiple lives in the process. Ethan had gotten permission to visit, had planned a whole speech about pain and loss and justice. But when he'd sat across from James Duval in that prison visiting room, he'd seen something he hadn't expected. Another broken human being, destroyed by guilt and consequences. His own children growing up without a father, his wife divorced and struggling, his entire life reduced to before and after. Hating him hadn't helped. Forgiveness hadn't either. That was too strong a word for what Ethan felt. But he'd learned something about the difference between the person and the action, about how alcohol turned humans into weapons they never meant to be. Because someone needs to, Ethan finally answered, and everyone else was too busy watching. Isabel studied him for a long moment. I don't know you, she said. Not really. You work in logistics, you have a daughter, you interviewed with my assistant 3 years ago. She paused. You've never asked me for anything. Should I have? Everyone else does. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every interaction has an angle. People collect access to me like trading cards. Her expression hardened. You must want something. That's how this works. Right now, I want to make sure you get home safely. Ethan pulled out his phone. I can call you a car. A private service, not connected to the company. No one has to know. And you? She watched him carefully. What do you get out of this? The satisfaction of not having to read a headline tomorrow about my CEO passed out in a hotel lobby. That surprised a real laugh out of her. Short and sharp, but genuine. Practical. I'm a logistics manager. Practical is kind of my thing. He started scrolling through car services, but Isabel reached out and touched his phone screen, stopping him. I don't trust strangers right now. She took a breath. I don't trust myself right now. My judgment is, she gestured vaguely, compromised. Okay. Ethan lowered his phone. What do you want to do? She looked at him again, and he had the unsettling feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years. Not as employee number 1847, not as the single dad in logistics who left every day at 5:30 sharp, not as a role or a function, just as a person. You don't drink, she said suddenly. I noticed. All night you had the same glass. Water. Water, he confirmed. Why? It wasn't something he advertised, but the question felt honest, not intrusive. Personal reasons. Lost someone to a drunk driver. Made a choice about what kind of person I wanted to be after that. Understanding flickered across her face, followed by something that might have been shame. And here I am, the cautionary tale. You're a person who had too much to drink at a party. That doesn't make you a cautionary tale, it makes you human. He pocketed his phone. My car's in the garage, I can drive you home. Straight there, no detours, no conversation if you don't want it. Just a safe ride home. Or I can wait here while you figure out another option. Your choice. Isabel was silent for a long time. In the background, hotel life hummed along. The ding of elevator bells, the murmur of conversation from the bar. Someone laughing too loud in the distance. Finally, she spoke. Why don't I feel like you're trying to leverage this? Because I'm not. Everyone leverages everything. Not everyone? Ethan stood, offering his hand. Come on, let's get you home. She took his hand, her palm warm and slightly damp against his, and let him help her up. They walked through the lobby, her steps steadier now but still requiring his support. No one stopped them. No one seemed to notice at all. In Chicago, even in a luxury hotel, two people leaving together was unremarkable. The parking garage was cold, their breath forming clouds in the November air. Ethan's car sat in a far corner, a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door from where Maddie had accidentally swung it into a pole at the grocery store. It looked profoundly out of place next to the Mercedes and Teslas that filled the executive parking section. This is yours? Isabel's tone was carefully neutral. This is mine. He unlocked it, opening the passenger door for her. The interior was clean but worn. A booster seat in the back that Maddie had finally outgrown last year, but he hadn't removed. A pine air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror and a collection of Maddie's hairbands on the gear shift that he kept meaning to return to her. Isabel slid into the passenger seat, looking around the car's interior like an anthropologist studying an alien culture. When Ethan got in the driver's side, she was touching the air freshener, making it spin slowly. I haven't been in a car like this in 20 years, she said softly. Maybe longer. It gets me where I need to go. He started the engine. It turned over on the second try, which was actually good for the Civic. Address? She rattled off a street in Lincoln Park, one of Chicago's most expensive neighborhoods. Of course. Ethan pulled up the GPS on his phone, mounted on the dashboard with a cracked holder that Maddie had covered in stickers of stars and moons. They drove in silence for the first few minutes, leaving downtown's glittering towers behind for the quieter streets of residential Chicago. The city was beautiful at night, Ethan thought. The lake stretched out to their left, dark and vast. Streetlights cast pools of amber light. Even in November, with winter pressing close, there was something magical about Chicago after dark. Thank you, Isabel said suddenly, for back there, for this, for not, she paused, for not making it worse. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You put yourself at risk by helping me. By tomorrow, everyone at the company will know you drove me home. They'll speculate, they'll assume. Her voice carried a bitter edge. They'll probably decide we're having an affair. Ethan's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. Let them speculate. I did the right thing. That's all that matters. Is it? She turned in her seat to look at him, and he was grateful for the excuse of watching the road so he didn't have to meet her eyes. Ethan, can I call you Ethan? Yes, ma'am. Stop calling me ma'am. It makes me feel ancient. She laughed softly. Isabel, or Ms. Rowan, if you can't break the professional habit. But tonight, just Isabel. Okay, Isabel. The name felt strange in his mouth, intimate in a way that made him uncomfortable. You're going to face questions tomorrow, she continued, from HR, from your colleagues, maybe from the board. They're going to want to know what happened, what I said, whether I did anything inappropriate. They'll dig into your background, look for connections, try to figure out your angle. I don't have an angle. I believe you, but they won't. She sighed. I'll make sure you're protected. I'll issue a statement, clear your name, make sure everyone knows you were simply being a good Samaritan. Don't do that. She blinked. What? Don't make a statement about me. Don't draw more attention to this than it needs. Ethan checked his mirror, changing lanes to avoid a delivery truck. The more you try to protect me, the more people will think there's something to protect. Just let it be what it was. One colleague helping another at a party. Nothing scandalous, nothing secret. Just basic human decency. Isabel was quiet for a moment. That's actually smart, letting the gossip burn itself out instead of feeding it. Like I said, logistics. I think about the most efficient path from A to B. And what's B in this scenario? Tomorrow morning, when we both wake up and go back to our regular lives. This becomes a weird night that happened once. We don't make it more than it is. She turned back to face forward, her reflection ghostly in the passenger window. You make it sound simple, isn't it? Nothing in my life is simple, Ethan. Success is complicated. Power is complicated. Being a woman in charge of $1 billion company is... She laughed without humor. Exhausting. They drove past a late-night diner, its neon sign flickering. A couple stood outside, sharing a cigarette and laughing about something. Normal people, Ethan thought. People whose names wouldn't appear in business magazines, whose mistakes wouldn't make headlines. People who could get drunk at a party and stumble home without it threatening their entire empire. Can I ask you something? Ethan kept his voice gentle. And you can tell me to shut up if it's out of line. Go ahead. Tonight wasn't just about celebrating, was it? Isabel was silent for so long that Ethan thought she might not answer. Then, I finalized my divorce papers today. The words hung in the air between them. Ethan didn't know what to say. He knew she'd been married. There had been photos in business magazines from years ago, a tall man with silver hair and a practiced smile. But he hadn't realized. I didn't know you were going through that, he finally said. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's been over for 3 years. We just couldn't agree on how to divide the assets, who got what pieces of the life we'd built together. Her voice was flat, emotionless. Robert wanted the house in Aspen. I wanted him to disappear. We compromised. He got Aspen, and I got to never see him again. Divorce is hard. The understatement of the century, but what else could he say? Marriage was harder. She tilted her head back against the seat. Everyone told me not to marry him. He was a consultant, charming, brilliant at first, but fundamentally empty. My father said he was marrying the company, not me. Turns out Dad was right. How long were you together? 12 years married, 15 together. For most of it, I thought we had something real. Then the company started really taking off, and I realized he'd been playing a part. The supportive husband, the proud partner. But when I actually needed support, when the pressure got bad, she trailed off. He found support elsewhere, multiple elsewheres. Ethan didn't respond immediately. What could he say? That he was sorry? That betrayal hurt in ways that never fully healed? He knew that already. Different kind of loss than his, but loss all the same. The papers were supposed to be finalized last month, Isabel continued, but his lawyers kept stalling, finding new clauses to negotiate, new assets to fight over. Today, my lawyer called and said it was done. Final. Over. And I thought I'd feel relieved. She laughed bitterly. I just felt empty. 15 years of my life reduced to signatures on legal documents. So you went to the gala and tried to drink away the emptiness, Ethan said quietly. I went to the gala and tried to prove I was fine. Better than fine. Triumphant. She rubbed her eyes. Instead, I proved I'm a mess who can't hold her liquor and needs to be rescued by the logistics department. You proved you're human. That's not weakness. In my world, it is. They were getting closer to Lincoln Park now. The neighborhood's growing more refined. The house is larger and set back from the street behind gates and security systems. Isabel directed him through a series of turns until they pulled up in front of a modern townhouse that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine, all glass and steel and calculated angles. Ethan parked, killed the engine. Do you need help getting inside? I'm better now. The car ride, the fresh air. She reached for the door handle, then stopped. You asked why I drank tonight. Can I ask you something now? Sure. Why didn't you? Really, I get that you lost someone, but she turned to face him fully. Most people who experience trauma around alcohol either embrace it or reject it. You rejected it so completely that you won't even touch it at a party where drinking is basically mandatory. That speaks to something more than just a decision. That's a vow. Ethan looked down at his hands on the steering wheel. He wasn't used to talking about this, about the dark period after Sarah died when he'd stood in the alcohol aisle of the grocery store and stared at bottles for 20 minutes, wondering if drinking himself numb would make the pain stop. After Sarah died, I had Maddie to take care of, he said slowly. She was 4 years old, and she'd just lost her mother. She needed me to be present, stable, reliable. And I knew... He swallowed against the tightness in his throat. I knew that if I started drinking to deal with the grief, it would become a crutch, and crutches break. So I made a promise to her and to myself. I would stay clear-headed. I would be the father she deserved, not the father my pain might turn me into. That's a hell of a promise. She's a hell of a kid. She deserves a parent who shows up. Isabel studied him in the dim light of the car. Your wife was lucky to have you. Your daughter is lucky to have you. I'm just doing my best. Most people's best is nowhere near good enough. Yours... She shook her head. You're remarkable, Ethan Cole. Don't let anyone tell you different. Before he could respond, she opened the car door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The cold November air rushed in, dispelling the close intimacy of the car's interior. Ethan got out too, walking around to make sure she could manage the steps to her front door. She moved more steadily now, the alcohol's fog lifting with each minute. At her door, she paused with her keys in hand. Tomorrow, she said without turning around, everyone's going to ask you what happened tonight. I know. What will you tell them? Ethan considered. That my boss needed help, and I helped her. Nothing more. And if they push, if they try to make it something else, then I'll tell them the same thing again. The truth doesn't need embellishment. Isabel turned then, and in the porch light, he could see that her eyes were wet. Not crying, not quite, but close. I've built my entire life around being strong, she said quietly. Around never needing anyone, never showing vulnerability, never being anything less than perfect. And tonight, I failed at all of it. In front of my entire company, in front of you. You didn't fail. You're human. There's a difference. Is there? She wiped quickly at her eyes. Because, from where I'm standing, being human just feels like another word for weak. Then you're standing in the wrong place. Ethan kept his voice gentle but firm. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. It's about knowing when to ask for help. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable when you need to be. She smiled then, sad and slight, but real. You should write fortune cookies. Maddie says I should stick to logistics. That pulled a laugh from her, genuine this time. Smart kid. The smartest. He took a step back toward his car. You okay from here? I'm okay. She unlocked her door, then paused. Ethan? Yeah. Thank you. Really, you didn't have to do any of this. Yes, he said simply. I did. He waited until she was inside, until the lights came on in the front hallway, and he could see her shadow moving past the windows. Only then did he return to his car, the adrenaline of the evening finally starting to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. The drive home took him back through the heart of Chicago, the city quiet now in the deep hours of night. He thought about Isabel alone in that glass house, surrounded by the evidence of her success, but also her emptiness. Divorced, isolated, performing strength for an audience that would tear her apart at the first sign of weakness. He thought about the weight she carried, the expectations, the constant vigilance. No wonder she'd needed to crack tonight, to let the pressure escape however she could. When he finally pulled into his own driveway, a modest house in a modest neighborhood 45 minutes from downtown, it was nearly 2 a.m. The babysitter, a college student from down the street, was asleep on his couch with her textbook open on her chest. He woke her gently, paid her double what he'd promised, and thanked her for staying so late. After she left, Ethan checked on Maddie. She was sprawled across her bed in the boneless way only children could manage, her stuffed elephant clutched to her chest, her mouth slightly open as she breathed. The nightlight he'd installed after Sarah died still glowed in the corner. She'd never quite outgrown her fear of the dark. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching her sleep. This was what mattered. This was his whole world right here. One 9-year-old girl with her mother's eyes and his stubborn chin, who believed he could fix anything and still thought he was the smartest person alive. Tomorrow there would be questions and rumors and consequences. But tonight, he'd done the right thing. He'd seen someone who needed help, and he'd helped them. Sarah would have done the same. She'd always been better at seeing people than he was, at moving toward pain instead of away from it. "I miss you," he whispered to the empty hallway, to the ghost of the woman who wasn't there to hear him. "Every single day, I miss you." Maddie stirred in her sleep, mumbled something unintelligible, and rolled over. The stuffed elephant fell to the floor. Ethan picked it up gently, tucked it back beside her, and kissed her forehead. Then he retreated to his own room, exhausted but too wired to sleep. He changed out of the rented tuxedo, hung it carefully for return, and sat on the edge of his bed in the darkness. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Got your number from the company directory. Hope that's not creepy. Just wanted to say thank you again. You're a good person, Ethan Cole. The world needs more of those. IR." He stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed, "You're welcome, get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day." Her response came almost immediately. "Is it? Or is it just the same day wearing a new face?" Ethan didn't know how to answer that. After a minute, another message appeared. "Sorry, I'm philosophical when I'm drunk and tired. Ignore me." "Get some sleep," he wrote back. "Everything looks better in the morning." "Does it?" "Usually, not always, but usually. I'll take those odds. Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Isabel." He set the phone down and finally lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent except for the familiar creaks and settles of old wood adjusting to the night. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Ethan had helped dozens of people over the years. It was just who he was, how he moved through the world. But something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the vulnerability in Isabel's eyes when the mask had finally slipped. Maybe it was the recognition of shared pain, different sources, but the same weight. Maybe it was just the strangeness of his two worlds colliding, the CEO in her glass tower and the single dad in his worn-down house. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know if helping Isabel tonight would cost him his job, or his reputation, or both. Didn't know if she'd pretend it never happened, or if she'd acknowledge him with that slight nod she gave people who'd served their purpose. But he knew he'd made the right choice. In a room full of people who'd looked away, he'd looked toward. In a world that rewarded self-interest, he'd chosen compassion. That had to count for something. Sleep finally came, pulling him under in fragments, dreams of ballrooms and broken glass, of a woman in red falling and falling, of catching her just before she hit the ground, of Maddie asking why he'd been out so late, and him not having any answer she'd understand. When he woke 6 hours later to his alarm, the morning sun was already streaming through his bedroom window, and Maddie was bouncing on his bed, chattering about the pancakes she wanted for breakfast, and the math test she was nervous about, And had he remembered to sign her permission slip for the field trip next week? The night before felt like a fever dream, like something that had happened to someone else. But when he checked his phone, there was the text from Isabel, proof that it had been real. He made Maddie her pancakes, chocolate chip, her favorite. He signed the permission slip. He helped her study multiplication tables while she ate. He packed her lunch and walked her to the bus stop, kissing her forehead and telling her she'd do great on her test because she was brilliant. And then he got in his car and drove to work, to Rowan Industries, to whatever consequences waited for him there. Because that's what you did when you made the right choice. You faced the fallout with your head up and your conscience clear. You did it for the people who depended on you and for the person you wanted to be. You showed up. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt longer than usual. Ethan watched the numbers climb, each ding of a passing floor like a countdown to something he couldn't quite name. His reflection stared back at him from the polished steel doors. Same face as yesterday, same slightly rumpled shirt he'd ironed himself, same expression of quiet determination he wore whenever Maddie's teacher called him in for a conference he wasn't prepared for. The doors opened onto the logistics department, and immediately he knew something was different. The usual morning chaos, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the perpetual hum of people managing the movement of goods across continents, had been replaced by a thick, expectant silence. Heads turned as he walked to his desk. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even Marcus from accounting, who usually shouted good morning from across the room, simply stared. Ethan set his coffee down, gas station brew in a travel mug Maddie had decorated with stickers, and booted up his computer. His hands were steady. Whatever was coming, he'd face it the same way he faced everything, head-on and honest. "Ethan?" A voice behind him. He turned to find Jennifer, Isabel's assistant, standing there with an expression that managed to be both professional and deeply uncomfortable. "Ms. Rowan would like to see you in her office." The department's collective attention sharpened. This was it then, the summons, the reckoning. "Now?" Ethan asked, though he knew the answer. "Yes, she's cleared her morning schedule." Jennifer's tone gave nothing away, but her eyes held something that might have been sympathy. "Follow me, please." The walk to the executive floor was a special kind of torture. Jennifer moved with practiced efficiency through hallways Ethan rarely traveled, past conference rooms with glass walls and modern art that probably cost more than his house. Other employees stepped aside as they passed, their curiosity barely concealed. By now, everyone knew. The logistics manager who'd driven the CEO home, the single father who'd somehow ended up in the center of what would undoubtedly become this quarter's juiciest piece of office gossip. They reached Isabel's office, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, the city sprawling out like a concrete promise in every direction. Jennifer knocked once and opened the door without waiting for a response. "Mr. Cole is here," she announced. "Thank you, Jennifer. Hold my calls." Isabel's voice carried that clipped authority Ethan recognized from every company-wide meeting, every quarterly report. The voice that brokered international deals and commanded boardrooms. Jennifer closed the door behind him, and suddenly Ethan was alone with Isabel Rowan for the first time since he dropped her off at her doorstep 8 hours ago. She stood by the windows, her back to him, silhouetted against the morning light. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment, her dark hair pulled back in its usual severe bun. From this angle, she looked exactly like the woman everyone feared, powerful, untouchable, carved from ice and ambition. Then she turned, and Ethan saw the exhaustion in her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing her desk. "Please sit." Ethan sat, suddenly aware of how his department store khakis and wrinkled shirt looked in this space designed for power. Isabel moved to her desk but didn't sit. Instead, she stood behind her chair, gripping its back with both hands like she needed the support. "I suppose you've noticed the attention this morning," she began. "Hard to miss." "Yes." "Well," she took a breath, "I want to address what happened last night. First, to reiterate my gratitude. You helped me when you had no obligation to, when doing so put you in an uncomfortable position professionally. That was—" She paused, searching for words. "That was extraordinarily kind. You already thanked me last night and in your text." "I know, but I wanted to say it again, here, in daylight, when I'm sober and clear-headed and can mean it properly. Her fingers tightened on the chair. Second, I want you to know that your position here is secure. More than secure. I've already spoken with HR to make it clear that you acted as a good Samaritan, nothing more. There will be no negative consequences to your employment, your advancement opportunities, or your reputation within this company. I appreciate that, but please let me finish. She held up one hand. I know what this place is like. I know how quickly rumors spread, how people love to create narratives where none exist. By the end of today, there will be a dozen theories about who you are to me, what happened last night, what favors you might have extracted in exchange for your discretion. Her expression hardened. I won't let that happen. You deserve better. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. The exhaustion was still there, lurking beneath the professional mask, but so was something else. Determination, maybe even defiance. What are you planning to do? He asked carefully. I'm sending a company-wide email this afternoon, briefly addressing last night's events. Nothing dramatic, nothing that will fuel more gossip, just a simple acknowledgement that I overindulged at a company function and that you assisted me home safely. Professional courtesy between colleagues, end of story. That's a mistake. Isabel blinked. Excuse me? Making an official statement draws more attention, not less. Right now it's just gossip. People speculating, making up stories, but nothing concrete. The minute you send that email, you make it real. You make it important. You give it weight. Ethan met her gaze steadily. You told me last night that you've built your life around being strong, around never showing vulnerability. Sending that email is an admission that something happened worth addressing. It's a crack in the armor. She was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she came around the desk and sat in the chair next to his instead of behind the desk. The gesture felt significant, a subtle shift from boss and employee to something more equal. So what would you suggest? She asked. Nothing. Let people talk. Let them speculate. In a week, something else will happen. Someone will get promoted. Someone will mess up a major account. The stock will spike or drop, and everyone will move on to that. But if you make a statement, you're telling everyone that this matters, that it affected you, that it's worth discussing. He paused. You can't control what people think, but you can control whether you give their thoughts power. Isabel studied him with those ice-blue eyes, and Ethan had the uncomfortable sensation of being dissected, analyzed, cataloged. You know, she said finally, most people in your position would want the public acknowledgement, the company-wide recognition that you helped the CEO, the social capital that comes with being in my good graces. I don't need social capital. I need to do my job and go home to my daughter. And you're not worried about what people are saying about you? About us? People will say what they want to say regardless of what I do. I can't control that. I can only control whether I let it bother me. He shrugged. Besides, I know the truth. You know the truth. That's enough. Something shifted in Isabel's expression, a softening, a crack in the professional veneer. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, I'd spend my entire life worried about other people's opinions, and I don't have that kind of energy to spare. She laughed softly, without humor. I wish I had that luxury. In my position, other people's opinions can make or break billion-dollar deals. Perception is everything. Is it? Or is that just what you've been told? Ethan leaned forward slightly. Last night, you were the most human I've ever seen you. Vulnerable, exhausted, real. And you know what? You didn't seem any less capable or intelligent or worthy of respect. You just seemed like a person dealing with a hard day. A person who got blackout drunk at a company function? Isabel countered, but there was no bite in her words. A person who had finalized her divorce papers after a 15-year marriage and needed a release. He kept his voice gentle. There's a difference between making a mistake and being a mistake. You did the former. You're not the latter. Isabel looked away, toward the windows and the lake beyond. My father used to say that the moment you show weakness, you've already lost. That leadership is about maintaining the illusion of invincibility because the second people see you bleed, they'll go for the throat. Your father sounds like he was lonely. He was brilliant. He built this company from nothing. And was he happy? The question hung between them. Isabel's jaw tightened. He was successful. That's not what I asked. No, she admitted quietly. He wasn't happy. He died alone in his office at 67, having pushed away everyone who ever cared about him in service of being strong enough, tough enough, unbreakable enough. She turned back to Ethan. And I've spent the last 10 years becoming exactly like him. You don't have to be. Don't I? Her laugh was bitter. I'm 42 years old, divorced, running a company where everyone is either afraid of me or trying to use me. I've optimized my entire life for success, and the result is, she gestured vaguely at the opulent office, the view, the empire. This, power without purpose, achievement without connection, success that tastes like ash. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd always said that life was meant to be felt, not just accomplished. How she'd drag him away from work emails to watch Maddie play in the sprinklers. How she'd insist on family dinners even when they were both exhausted. How she'd understood instinctively that joy was a practice, not a destination. After my wife died, he said slowly, I spent about 6 months just going through the motions. Getting up, taking care of Maddie, going to work, coming home, collapsing. I was functional, but I wasn't alive. I was just existing, surviving. He met Isabel's gaze. One day, Maddie asked me why I never smiled anymore. She was 5 years old, and she could see what I'd been trying to hide, that I'd given up on anything beyond just making it through each day. What did you tell her? The truth, that I was sad, and sometimes sad people forget how to smile. And she said, he smiled at the memory. She said, that's okay, Daddy. I'll smile enough for both of us until you remember how. He paused. That's when I realized that surviving wasn't enough, that I owed it to her, and to Sarah's memory, and to myself to figure out how to actually live again. Not just go through the motions, but to find meaning, connection, joy, even in the middle of grief. And did you figure it out? Some days. Other days I'm still learning, but the point is, I'm trying. I'm not just optimizing for survival anymore. Isabel was quiet, her expression distant. Then, I don't remember the last time someone spoke to me like this. Like I'm a person, not a position. Maybe you need to spend time with different people. Maybe I need to be a different person. Or maybe you just need to stop pretending to be what everyone expects and start being who you actually are. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Ethan saw something vulnerable and frightened in her eyes. What if I don't know who that is anymore? What if I've been performing for so long that there's nothing real left underneath? There's always something real underneath. You just have to be brave enough to look. A knock at the door interrupted them. Jennifer's voice came through. Ms. Rowan, the board meeting starts in 15 minutes. Isabel's expression shifted instantly, the vulnerability disappearing behind the professional mask. Thank you, Jennifer. I'll be there shortly. She stood, smoothing her suit. I should let you get back to work. Ethan stood as well. For what it's worth, I think you're better than you give yourself credit for. Last night, when everything fell apart, you didn't lash out or blame anyone. You just let yourself be human for a minute. That takes courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. He moved toward the door, then paused. Are you going to be okay? The question seemed to surprise her. Yes, I'm fine. I'm always fine. That's not what I asked. She met his gaze, and for just a moment the mask slipped again. I don't know, she admitted, but I'll figure it out. I always do. If you need... He stopped himself, recognizing the absurdity of what he'd been about to say. If you need anything. As if a logistics manager could offer anything of value to the CEO of a billion-dollar company. Never mind. Have a good meeting. He left before she could respond, before he could say anything else that blurred the lines that should exist between their worlds. Jennifer was waiting outside, her expression carefully neutral as she escorted him back to the elevator. The ride down to the 15th floor felt different than the ride up. Lighter somehow, as if he had discharged some obligation he hadn't known he was carrying. When the doors opened, he stepped out into a department that was no longer silent but buzzing with activity, people pretending they hadn't been waiting for his return. Marcus appeared at his elbow almost immediately. So, what happened? Are you fired? Promoted? Did she threaten you? Bribe you? None of the above. She thanked me, we talked, and now we both go back to work. Ethan sat at his desk and woke his computer. Exciting, right? That's it? That's all you're giving me? That's all there is to give. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, then laughed. You're either the most boring person I've ever met, or the best liar. I can't figure out which. I'm a single father with a 9-year-old daughter and a mortgage. Boring is kind of my brand. But Marcus wasn't wrong about the lying part. Because Ethan hadn't told him about the vulnerability in Isabel's eyes, the admission that she didn't know who she was anymore, the way she'd sat beside him instead of behind her desk. Those moments felt private, sacred even. Not secrets exactly, but truths that belonged only to the two people who'd shared them. The rest of the day passed in relative normalcy. Work piled up, supply chain issues with a shipment stuck in customs, a new client demanding impossible timelines, the usual chaos of moving goods around the world. Ethan buried himself in spreadsheets and logistics software, in the comfortable problems that had clear solutions. But his phone buzzed periodically with texts from colleagues, some concerned, some curious, some blatantly fishing for gossip. He answered the first few with variations of everything's fine, and then started ignoring them. Let them wonder. Let them create their narratives. He had work to do. At 5:30, he shut down his computer and headed for the parking garage. In the elevator, he found himself sharing the space with two women from marketing, both of whom fell silent when he entered and then burst into whispered conversation the moment he exited. He caught fragments. Can you believe? And I heard she was completely. And do you think they're... Before the doors closed behind him. His phone rang as he reached his car. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him hit accept. Mr. Cole? A man's voice, smooth and professional. This is David Wright from the Tribune's business section. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about last night's... Ethan hung up. A reporter. Of course. He should have expected this. Should have prepared for the reality that helping Isabel wouldn't just create internal gossip, but external scrutiny. By tomorrow, there might be articles. Speculation about his relationship with the CEO. Questions about favoritism or impropriety. Journalists digging into his background looking for angles and connections. The thought made him tired. Not worried, he knew the truth, knew he'd done nothing wrong, just tired. This was the cost of stepping forward, of being the person who helped instead of looking away. Visibility, scrutiny, questions he didn't want to answer. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He declined the call, then another, then another. Finally, he turned off his phone entirely and drove home in blessed silence. Maddie was already there when he arrived, courtesy of the neighbor who watched her after school until Ethan got home. She was sprawled on the living room floor with her math homework, pencil stuck behind her ear, tongue poking out in concentration the way Sarah's used to when she was focused. Hey, baby girl. Ethan dropped his keys in the bowl by the door. How was your day? Fine. Mrs. Patterson gave us too much homework. Maddie didn't look up from her worksheet. And Emma said her mom said you're famous now. Are you famous? Ethan's heart sank. Of course the gossip would reach Maddie's school. Emma's mother worked in finance, probably knew someone who knew someone at Rowan Industries. Not famous, just something happened at work and some people are talking about it. What happened? Now Maddie did look up, her eyes, Sarah's eyes, bright with curiosity. I helped someone who needed help, that's all. And that made you famous? It made some people curious. But it'll blow over. Everything blows over eventually. Maddie studied him with the uncanny perception children sometimes had, the ability to sense when adults were simplifying truths. Emma's mom said you helped a lady, an important lady. My boss needed a ride home. I gave her one. That's nice. You're good at helping people. Maddie returned to her homework, the topic apparently settled in her mind. Can we have tacos for dinner? Absolutely. Go wash your hands. While Maddie ran upstairs, Ethan stood in his kitchen. The kitchen where Sarah had taught him to cook, where they'd danced to old Motown songs while dinner burned on the stove, where they'd planned their future over glasses of wine and dreams bigger than this modest house could hold, and let himself feel the weight of the day. His phone, still powered off in his pocket, felt like a live grenade. When he turned it back on, there would be more calls from reporters, more texts from colleagues, maybe even messages from Isabel. The world would come rushing back in with all its noise and expectations and judgments. But right now there was just the sound of Maddie humming upstairs, the familiar comfort of his home, the simple task of making dinner for his daughter. This was real. This was what mattered. Everything else was just noise. He was browning the ground beef when his phone finally powered on and immediately erupted with notifications. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, 3 voicemails. Ethan scrolled through them quickly, deleting the obvious spam and reporter requests, scanning the rest for anything urgent. Most were from coworkers, variations on, "Are you okay?" and "What's the real story?" and "Call me when you can." Nothing urgent, nothing that couldn't wait. But there, near the bottom of the list, was a message from Isabel. Just one, sent 2 hours ago. "I didn't send the email. You were right. Thank you for the advice, and thank you for this morning. It helped more than you know." Ethan stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed, "You're welcome. Hope the board meeting went well." Her response came almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting, as well as they ever do. "Everyone asked about last night, of course. I gave them the same answer I gave you this morning. A colleague helped me home. Nothing scandalous, moving on. And they accepted that? Not gracefully, but yes, though I suspect your phone has been ringing off the hook with reporters. A few calls. I didn't answer. Smart. I've authorized our PR team to handle any media inquiries. They'll give a standard statement. Ms. Rowan had too much to drink at a company event. An employee assisted her home safely. We appreciate his professionalism. No further comment." That works. There was a pause, then, "Can I ask you something personal?" Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him to redirect, to maintain professional boundaries, to not let this conversation drift into territory that blurred the lines between CEO and employee. But he remembered the vulnerability in her eyes this morning, the quiet admission that she didn't know who she was anymore. "Sure," he typed. "How did you do it? After your wife died? How did you keep going?" The question hit harder than he'd expected. Ethan set his phone down, stirred the beef, tried to formulate an answer that was honest without being too raw. Maddie's footsteps thundered down the stairs, but she veered into the living room, distracted by something on TV. He picked up his phone again. "I didn't have a choice. I had a daughter who needed me. So I got up every morning and put one foot in front of the other, even when I wanted to stay in bed forever. Eventually the steps got easier. Not easy, but easier. But what about the loneliness? The feeling that you're going through the motions but not really living. Still working on that part. Some days are better than others. I've learned that grief doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. You carry it with you and figure out how to make room for other things too. Joy, connection, purpose. They can coexist with the sadness. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's better than the alternative." Another pause. Then, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be unloading on you like this. You're not my therapist. No, but I'm someone who's been through loss and come out the other side. If that helps, I'm glad to talk." "It does help. More than you know." A moment later, "I should let you go. I'm sure you have better things to do than text with your boss about existential crises. I'm making tacos. Maddie's homework is done. I've got a few minutes. Tacos sound nice. I can't remember the last time I had tacos. Probably some overpriced restaurant version with truffle oil and microgreens that cost $40 a plate." Ethan smiled despite himself. "These are ground beef, store-brand shells, and whatever toppings are on sale, probably $5 total. But Maddie says they're the best tacos in Chicago." I believe her. Kids don't lie about food. No, they don't. He could see her typing, then stopping, then typing again. Finally, "Thank you, Ethan. For last night, for this morning, for this conversation. You've been unexpectedly kind in a world where kindness is rare. Just being human. You should try it sometime. Maybe I will." Then, "Good night. Good night." Ethan set his phone aside and called Maddie for dinner. They ate at the kitchen table, the TV off, just the two of them sharing the day's stories. Maddie talked about Emma's new puppy and the spelling test on Friday, and how her friend Lucas had gotten in trouble for putting a frog in the teacher's desk. Normal things, kid things, the beautiful mundane moments that made up a life. After dinner, they did dishes together, Maddie washing, Ethan drying, both of them singing along badly to the radio. Then homework review, bath time, the nightly negotiation about whether she really needed to brush her teeth for the full 2 minutes or if 90 seconds was close enough. Finally, bedtime. Ethan sat on the edge of Maddie's bed while she arranged her stuffed animals in their precise configuration. Elephant closest, then the bear Sarah had given her before she was born, then the collection of smaller creatures that had accumulated over 9 years of birthdays and holidays. "Daddy?" Maddie's voice was soft, sleepy. "Are you in trouble? From helping that lady?" "No, baby, I'm not in trouble." Emma's mom sounded like you might be in trouble. Emma's mom doesn't know the whole story, but I promise, everything's fine. I helped someone, just like you'd help a friend who fell on the playground. That's what good people do. Maddie considered this. Is the lady nice? Ethan paused, thinking about Isabel's exhaustion, her vulnerability, the admission that she'd built a life that left her feeling empty. She's doing her best, just like everybody else. Then I'm glad you helped her. Maddie yawned, snuggling deeper into her blankets. Mommy would be proud. The words hit him like a punch to the chest, sudden and breathtaking. Yeah, he managed. Yeah, she would be. He kissed Maddie's forehead, turned on her nightlight, and retreated to the hallway. In his own room, he sat on the edge of his bed in the darkness, letting the day wash over him. 24 hours ago, he'd been at a gala, watching a woman in red drink herself into oblivion. Now he was in the center of a story he never asked to be part of, connected to someone whose world was so different from his that they might as well be from different planets. His phone buzzed one more time. Another message from Isabel. I lied before. Tacos don't sound nice. They sound perfect. Maybe someday you can tell me where to find the $5 kind. Ethan smiled in the darkness and typed back. Anytime. Everyone deserves good cheap tacos. Is that an offer? He hesitated. Was it? Was he really suggesting that Isabel Rowan, CEO of a billion-dollar company, come to his modest neighborhood for grocery store tacos made by a single father who could barely keep his own life together? The absurdity should have stopped him. The impropriety, the professional boundaries, the sheer difference in their circumstances, all of it should have made him delete the conversation and pretend this strange intimacy had never developed. Instead, he wrote, "It's whatever you need it to be." Her response took longer this time. He could imagine her in that glass house, alone with her finalized divorce papers and her empire and her exhaustion, trying to decide whether to accept this small offer of ordinary human connection. Finally, I might take you up on that. Fair warning. Fair warning received. Offer stands. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Isabel. He powered off his phone, set it on the nightstand, and lay back in the darkness. Outside, Chicago hummed with its nighttime symphony, distant sirens, the rumble of the L train, the city that never quite slept. Inside, his house settled into silence. Just him and his sleeping daughter and the ghost of his wife who taught him that kindness was never wasted, even when it cost you. Tomorrow, there would be more questions, more scrutiny, more careful navigation of the impossible space between who he was and who Isabel needed him to be. But tonight, he'd offered tacos to a woman who'd forgotten what it felt like to be treated like a regular human being, and she'd almost accepted. That felt like progress. Small, strange, and probably inadvisable, but progress nonetheless. Sleep came in fragments that night, punctuated by dreams of ballrooms and glass houses, and a woman's voice asking him how he kept going when the world demanded more than he had to give. When Ethan's alarm dragged him back to consciousness at 6 a.m., he felt like he'd run a marathon in his sleep. The morning routine was the same as always. Wake Maddie, make breakfast, pack lunch. The familiar choreography of single parenthood that left no room for existential contemplation. But when he checked his phone while Maddie brushed her teeth, he found 3 more messages from reporters and a company-wide email from HR reminding all employees that discussing company matters with external media was grounds for termination. So it had begun. The circling of wagons, the corporate machinery grinding into protective mode. Ethan deleted the reporter messages without reading them and pocketed his phone just as Maddie appeared, backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair in a ponytail he'd managed to make only slightly crooked. "You look tired, Daddy," she observed with the blunt honesty of 9-year-olds everywhere. "Just didn't sleep well." "I'm fine." "Are you sure?" Because Emma's mom said, "Baby, I need you to do me a favor." Ethan knelt down to her level, his hands on her shoulders. "Whatever Emma or her mom or anyone else says about me at school, I need you to just smile and say your dad is fine and change the subject. Can you do that?" Maddie's eyes went wide with a seriousness that made her look suddenly older. "Is something bad happening?" "No, but sometimes grown-ups like to talk about things that aren't their business, and it's easier to just not engage. That's a fancy word for, I know what engage means. We learned it in vocabulary." She chewed her lip, a nervous habit she'd inherited from Sarah. "Are people being mean to you?" "Not mean, just curious, and curiosity isn't bad, but it can be exhausting to deal with." "Okay." She hugged him suddenly fiercely, her small arms tight around his neck. "I love you, Daddy, even if you're famous now." He laughed despite himself. "I love you too. And I'm not famous, I promise." The drive to school was quiet, Maddie humming along to the radio while Ethan navigated the morning traffic. When he pulled up to the drop-off zone, she kissed his cheek and bounded out, all childish energy and uncomplicated joy. He watched her disappear into the building, her backpack nearly as big as she was, and felt the familiar ache of watching her grow up without Sarah there to see it. Then he turned toward downtown, toward Rowan Industries, toward whatever awaited him on day 2 of being the man who'd driven Isabel Rowan home. The parking garage felt different somehow, as if even the concrete and steel had absorbed the gossip and were judging him. Ethan parked in his usual spot, 3rd level, northwest corner, where the overhead light flickered and the concrete pillar had a crack shaped like a lightning bolt, and sat for a moment, gathering himself. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Heads up, Jenkins from Executive Relations was asking about you this morning. Not sure what he wants, but figured you should know." Ethan typed back, "Thanks for the warning. Jenkins." That was interesting. Executive Relations handled sensitive matters, investigations, disputes, anything that might become a legal problem. Either Isabel had flagged something proactively to protect herself, or someone on the board was digging deeper than simple curiosity warranted. He pocketed his phone and headed inside, where the elevator ride felt like descending into a coliseum. When the doors opened on the 15th floor, the atmosphere was different than yesterday, less shocked silence, more pointed whispering. People had processed the initial surprise and moved on to speculation and judgment. Ethan made it halfway to his desk before a man in an expensive suit intercepted him. Late 50s, silver hair, the kind of practiced smile that never reached the eyes. "Mr. Cole, Richard Jenkins, Executive Relations, do you have a moment?" It wasn't really a question. "Of course." "Wonderful. There's a conference room just down the hall. This won't take long." The conference room was small, windowless, deliberately neutral in the way spaces designed for difficult conversations always were. Jenkins gestured for Ethan to sit, then closed the door with a soft click that felt ominous. "I want to start by saying this isn't an investigation," Jenkins began, settling into his chair with the casual authority of someone used to making people nervous. "We're simply doing our due diligence in light of recent events. Standard protocol when there's close contact between executive leadership and other employees." "I understand." Ethan kept his voice level, his posture relaxed. He'd done nothing wrong, and he wasn't going to act like he had. "Good, good. So, in your own words, can you walk me through what happened Monday night?" Ethan had expected this question, had rehearsed the answer in his head during the drive. "I attended the company gala at the Drake Hotel. Around midnight, I noticed Ms. Rowan seemed unsteady. Her driver had already left for the evening, and she appeared to need assistance getting home safely. I offered to drive her, she accepted, and I drove her directly to her residence. She went inside, I went home. That's the entire story." Jenkins smiled that empty smile. "And during the drive, did she say anything of a personal nature? Discuss company matters? Make any requests or offers?" "She mentioned finalizing her divorce. I expressed condolences. That was the extent of the personal conversation." Nothing about company operations, personnel decisions, strategic planning? Nothing. And she didn't offer you any kind of compensation or consideration for your assistance? Ethan met Jenkins' gaze steadily. She said, "Thank you, that's all." "Come now, Mr. Cole. You must understand how this looks. A relatively junior employee, no previous connection to the CEO, suddenly in a position of, let's call it intimacy, alone with her, late at night, during a vulnerable moment. You can see why we might be concerned about the optics." Optics of what exactly? Someone helping a colleague? Optics of impropriety, of potential leverage, of... Jenkins leaned forward slightly. "Let me be blunt. There are people on the board who are concerned that Miss Rowan's judgment may have been compromised, that she may have shared confidential information or made promises she shouldn't have. Your cooperation in clarifying exactly what transpired would be appreciated." Understanding dawned cold and clear. This wasn't about protecting Ethan. This was about protecting the company from Isabel, about building a case that she'd shown poor judgment, that her leadership was questionable. They wanted him to give them ammunition. "I'm happy to cooperate," Ethan said carefully, "but I can only tell you what happened, which is exactly what I already told you. Ms. Rowan needed a safe ride home. I provided it. Nothing inappropriate occurred. No confidential information was shared. No promises were made. She thanked me, I went home, and the next morning we both returned to work. If that's not the dramatic scandal you're looking for, I apologize, but I can't invent one." Jenkins' smile thinned. "No one is asking you to invent anything. We're simply trying to establish facts." "Then the facts are simple. Sometimes people just help each other without hidden agendas. I know that might be difficult to believe in a corporate environment, but it does happen. You have a daughter, correct? Madison?" The shift in topic was deliberate, pointed. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "Maddie, yes." "Single father. That must be difficult. Expensive, private schools, college funds, the future. These things require resources." Jenkins' tone was conversational, almost friendly. "I imagine you'd want to do everything possible to provide for her." The implication hung in the air like smoke. They were offering him something, or threatening to take something away. Ethan couldn't tell which, and maybe that was the point. "My daughter is provided for," he said quietly, "and she's learning that integrity matters more than money, that doing the right thing is its own reward. I'd hate to teach her a different lesson. Of course. I'm simply noting that ambitious men sometimes make choices that benefit their families. Nothing wrong with that. Except I'm not an ambitious man. I'm a logistics manager who goes home at 5:30 every day to make dinner for his kid. I don't want a promotion. I don't want special treatment. I don't want anything except to do my job and raise my daughter. Is that clear enough?" Jenkins studied him for a long moment, and Ethan could see the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. He was trying to figure out what kind of man Ethan was, what buttons to push, what leverage might work. Finding none, he switched tactics. "Ms. Rowan has had a difficult year," Jenkins said, his tone shifting to something almost sympathetic. "The divorce, the pressure from the Tokyo expansion, the board's concerns about her direction for the company. Some of us worry that she's not, how shall I put this, not as stable as she once was, that her judgment might be affected by personal issues. Her judgment seemed fine to me. On Monday night, when she was intoxicated at a company function, she made one human mistake after a difficult day. That doesn't indicate instability. That indicates she's a person dealing with stress like everyone else. You're quite defensive of her." "I'm defensive of basic human decency. There's a difference." Jenkins sat back, and the friendly mask dropped entirely. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to be frank with you. The board is divided on Ms. Rowan's continued leadership. Half think she's brilliant and irreplaceable. Half think she's becoming a liability. What happened Monday night is the kind of incident that can tip the balance. If you have any information that suggests her judgment is compromised, now is the time to share it, for her sake as much as the company's. I have no such information because no such information exists. She had too much to drink at a party. It happens to millions of people every weekend. It doesn't make them unstable or unfit for leadership. Even when they're CEO of a billion-dollar company, especially then, the pressure you all put on her to be perfect, to never show weakness, to be invulnerable. Ethan stopped himself, recognizing that he was venturing into dangerous territory. Look, I've told you everything I know. If that's not enough, I can't help you. Jenkins stood, smoothing his suit. Very well, thank you for your time, Mr. Cole. I'm sure we'll speak again soon. The threat was implicit, but clear. This wasn't over. They'd keep digging, keep pushing, keep looking for cracks they could exploit. Ethan left the conference room feeling like he'd just survived the first round of something much larger and uglier than he'd anticipated. Back at his desk, he tried to focus on work, but the conversation with Jenkins had unsettled him. He pulled up his email and found a message from Isabel, sent 20 minutes ago. If Jenkins or anyone from executive relations approaches you, please know you're under no obligation to discuss anything beyond basic facts. If you feel uncomfortable, you can refer them to legal. I've already informed HR that you're not to be interrogated without representation present. Too late for that, but he appreciated the gesture. He typed back, already spoke with Jenkins, said nothing but the truth. Hope that doesn't cause you problems. Her response came immediately. The truth never causes me problems. Lies and cowardice do. You did the right thing. He implied the board is divided about your leadership. The board is always divided about something. Comes with the territory. A pause, then another message. Are you okay? Jenkins can be intimidating. I'm fine. Not my first time dealing with corporate politics, but probably your first time in the middle of them. I'm sorry. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. Ethan hesitated, then typed, You can't control other people's agendas, only your response to them. Someone wise told me that recently. Sounds like a smart person. She has her moments. He could almost hear her laugh through the screen. Then, I have meetings all day, but I wanted to check in. Make sure you know I have your back on this. I appreciate that. Focus on your meetings. I can handle Jenkins and whoever else comes sniffing around. I don't doubt it. Talk later. Ethan set his phone aside and forced himself into the rhythm of work. Supply chains didn't manage themselves, and he had 3 urgent shipments that needed rerouting due to weather delays in the Pacific. The problems were concrete, solvable, blissfully free of corporate intrigue. The morning passed in a blur of logistics software and phone calls with freight coordinators. Marcus stopped by around 11 with coffee and gossip, but Ethan waved him off with a tired smile. By noon, he was starting to believe he might actually survive the day without further incident. Then his desk phone rang. Internal line extension he didn't recognize. Ethan Cole? Mr. Cole, this is Sandra Whitmore from the Chicago Business Journal. I understand you're not permitted to speak with external media, but I wanted to reach out directly to give you an opportunity to tell your side of the story before we go to print. His stomach dropped. How did you get this number? I have my sources. Look, I know you're in a difficult position, but the story's coming out regardless. Isabel Rowan's public intoxication, your involvement, the questions about impropriety, we have multiple sources confirming the basics. I'm offering you a chance to provide context, to ensure your perspective is included. I have no comment. Ethan kept his voice level despite the anger building in his chest. And I'd appreciate if you didn't contact me at work again. Mr. Cole, I understand your loyalty, but you should know there are people saying you took advantage of Ms. Rowan's vulnerable state, that you're positioning yourself for advancement. Don't you want to defend yourself against those accusations? I'm hanging up now. Just one question. Are you and Ms. Rowan involved romantically? Ethan slammed the phone down hard enough to crack the plastic casing. Around him, heads turned. He took a breath, forcing his hands to unclench. This was spinning out of control faster than he'd anticipated. By tomorrow, there would be articles, speculation, his name, and Isabel's linked in ways that would follow them both for years. He should have just looked away. Should have let one of her assistants handle it, let the professional handlers do their job. Instead, he'd stepped forward, and now he was learning the cost of visibility in a world that consumed stories and spit out reputations. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Jennifer, Ms. Rowan's assistant. She asked me to inform you that a reporter from the Business Journal called her office fishing for information about you. Our PR team is handling it, but you should expect more calls. Don't engage. Forward everything to me at this number. At least he wasn't navigating this alone. Ethan forwarded Jennifer's number to his desk phone's blocked caller list and returned to his spreadsheets. Work was safe. Work was controllable. Work didn't ask him questions he couldn't answer or make implications about his character or threaten to destroy his privacy in pursuit of a headline. Lunch came and went. Ethan ate a sandwich at his desk, ignoring the pointed looks from colleagues who wanted gossip he wouldn't provide. His phone continued buzzing, more reporters, more blocked numbers, more people who thought his life was public property because he'd done one decent thing. By 3 p.m., he was exhausted and considering just leaving early, taking the hit to his vacation time in exchange for the sanctuary of his home. Then his phone rang again, and this time the caller ID showed Maddie's school. His heart stopped. "This is Ethan Cole." "Mr. Cole, this is Principal Davidson. Everything's fine, Maddie's fine, but we've had a situation I need to discuss with you." "What kind of situation?" "A reporter showed up at the school this afternoon asking questions about Maddie. Our front office staff turned them away immediately, but I wanted you to be aware. We've also increased monitoring during dismissal to ensure no unauthorized individuals approach her." The anger that had been simmering all day exploded into white-hot rage. "They came to her school? They tried to talk to my 9-year-old daughter?" "They didn't get anywhere near her, I assure you. But given the circumstances, I think it would be prudent for you to pick her up directly today rather than having her take the bus, just as a precaution." "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Ethan was already grabbing his jacket, his keys, his phone. "Thank you for calling." He made it to his car in record time, his hand shaking with fury as he started the engine. They'd gone after Maddie. Whatever lines he'd thought existed between work and home, between adults and children, between public interest and basic human decency, had just been obliterated. He was halfway to Maddie's school when his phone rang again. Isabel's number. "I heard," she said without preamble, her voice tight with anger. "Jennifer just informed me that a reporter went to your daughter's school. Ethan, I am so sorry. I'm handling it." "Handling it how?" "He was driving too fast, taking corners harder than he should. How do you handle someone terrorizing my kid?" "Our legal team is already drafting cease and desist letters. The Business Journal will be threatened with a lawsuit if they publish anything involving your daughter. I'm also calling in favors with every media outlet in Chicago to kill this story before it grows legs." "They shouldn't have her name. They shouldn't know she exists." "They shouldn't, but someone leaked it. Probably the same source who gave them your desk extension." A pause. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated this, should have protected you better. This isn't your fault. This is vultures doing what vultures do." Ethan forced himself to slow down, to breathe. "I'm picking her up now, then I'm taking her home and figuring out how to explain why strangers are asking questions about her. If you need security, I can arrange." "No, no more. No security, no lawyers, no escalation. That just makes it bigger, makes it real. I just need—" He stopped, unsure what he needed: protection, privacy, a time machine to Monday night so he could make a different choice. "You need it to stop," Isabel finished quietly. "I know, I'm trying, but these things have momentum. Once the story exists, it's hard to kill." "Try harder." He pulled into the school parking lot, scanning for unfamiliar cars, reporters with cameras. "I have to go. I need to get my daughter." "Ethan, wait. I know this is terrible, but please don't regret helping me. Don't let them make you regret basic human kindness." "I'll call you later." He hung up before she could respond, before the anger and fear and exhaustion could crack into something he didn't want her to hear. Maddie was waiting in the principal's office when he arrived, swinging her legs and looking thoroughly bored by the adult drama unfolding around her. When she saw him, her face lit up. "Daddy, Mrs. Davidson said you were coming to get me." "Is it early dismissal?" "Something like that." He took her hand, nodding his thanks to the principal. "Let's go home." "But it's only 3:15. Don't you have to work?" "Work can wait. You're more important." That seemed to satisfy her, and they walked to the car together, Ethan hyper-aware of every person, every movement, every potential threat. But the parking lot was clear, just parents and teachers going about their normal day. On the drive home, Maddie chattered about her day: a substitute teacher who let them watch a movie, a boy who brought a snake for show and tell, the drama of who was sitting with who at lunch. Normal kid concerns, beautifully mundane and uncomplicated. Ethan let her talk, grateful for the distraction, for the reminder that not everything had changed. Whatever storm was swirling around him and Isabel, Maddie's world was still intact. He would keep it that way. At home, he made her a snack and set her up with homework while he retreated to the kitchen to check his phone. 17 new messages, most from reporters but a few from colleagues expressing concern or curiosity. One from Isabel. Legal sent the letters. Business Journal has agreed not to publish anything about your daughter. We're still working on killing the larger story. He typed back, "Thank you. That helps. How's Maddie?" "She's fine. Doesn't understand what's happening, which is probably good." "And how are you?" Ethan stared at the question, at the simple concern behind it. He wanted to say he was fine, to maintain the stoic facade he'd perfected over 5 years of single parenthood. But something about Isabel's directness made lying feel impossible. Angry, scared, wishing I'd just minded my own business Monday night. Her response came quickly. "Don't. Please don't wish that. You saved me from something much worse than gossip. You gave me dignity when I had none. That matters. Not if it costs me my daughter's safety. It won't. I promise you I will burn every bridge I have to protect her. No story is worth terrorizing a child." He believed her. Not because of her power or resources, but because of the fury he'd heard in her voice on the phone. She understood. Maybe because she'd built her life as armor against exactly this kind of violation. "I need to be with Maddie right now," he typed. "Can we talk later?" "Of course, take care of your daughter. That's what matters most." Ethan pocketed his phone and returned to the living room, where Maddie was struggling with long division and muttering complaints under her breath. He sat beside her, guiding her through the problems, and for a while, the world contracted to just numbers and pencil marks and the simple satisfaction of finding correct answers. Dinner was mac and cheese, Maddie's comfort food. They ate on the couch, watching a nature documentary about penguins that made her laugh every time one of them waddled awkwardly across the ice. Normal. Easy. The life they'd built together from the ruins of before. After bath time, when Maddie was in bed with her elephant and her bear and the nightlight casting soft shadows, she looked up at him with Sarah's eyes and asked the question he'd been dreading. "Daddy, why did that stranger come to my school today?" He should have known she'd heard, that she'd understood more than she'd let on. Maddie was perceptive, always had been. "Some people are very curious about a situation at my work. They shouldn't have come to your school, and they won't be coming back." Mrs. Davidson said they were reporters, like on TV. "That's right. Why do reporters care about you? You're just a dad who works on computers." Just a dad. The simplicity of it made his chest ache. "I help someone at work, and some people are making a bigger deal out of it than it is. But it's going to blow over soon and everything will go back to normal. I promise." "Is the lady you helped nice?" "She's complicated, but yes, I think underneath everything she's nice." "Then I'm glad you helped her, even if it made reporters come." Maddie yawned, her eyes already closing. "You always help people, Daddy. It's one of my favorite things about you." He kissed her forehead, his throat tight. "I love you, baby girl, more than anything in the world." "Love you too," she mumbled, already drifting toward sleep. "Don't forget to turn off the hall light." He turned off the hall light and stood outside her room for a long moment, listening to her breathe, to the sound of his daughter, safe and peaceful, and unaware of how close the world had come to intruding on her innocence. Then he went to his own room and sat in the darkness, exhausted but too wired to sleep. His phone showed 3 more messages from Isabel, each one asking if he was okay, if Maddie was okay, if there was anything she could do. He called her instead of texting. She answered on the first ring. "How is she?" Isabel asked immediately. "She's fine. Asked some questions but accepted my answers. She's resilient." "She gets that from you." A pause. "Ethan, I can't tell you how sorry I am. This should never have touched her. But it did, and now I have to figure out how to protect her from something I can't control. You're not alone in that. I meant what I said. I will use every resource at my disposal to shield her, and you. I don't want your resources. I just want my life back." The words came out harsher than he'd intended, and for a moment there was only silence on the line. Then Isabel spoke, her voice quiet and sad. I know I've disrupted everything, made you visible when you wanted to stay invisible, dragged you into a world you never asked to be part of. She took a breath. If you want to walk away, I understand. I can arrange a transfer to a different department, different location even, somewhere the gossip won't follow. You can go back to being just a dad who works on computers. Ethan closed his eyes. It would be so easy to say yes, to take the escape she was offering, to put distance between them, to let this strange connection dissolve back into the proper professional boundaries, to protect Maddie by removing himself from the story entirely. But then he thought about Isabel standing by her office windows, looking out at a city that saw her as a symbol rather than a person. About her admission that she didn't know who she was anymore under all the armor. About the vulnerability in her eyes when she'd said thank you. I'm not asking for a transfer, he said finally. I'm just processing, figuring out how to navigate this without losing myself or putting Maddie at risk. We can figure it out together, if you want. Why? The question came out before he could stop it. Why do you care? I'm just some guy from logistics who drove you home one night. You've thanked me, protected me, gone above and beyond what anyone would expect. Why not just let this fade away? Isabel was quiet for so long that Ethan thought she might not answer. Then, because for the first time in 10 years, someone looked at me and saw a person instead of a position. Someone helped me without calculating what they'd get in return. Someone spoke to me with honesty instead of fear or flattery. Her voice caught slightly. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How lonely it is to go through life never quite sure if people mean what they say, if their kindness is genuine or strategic? I can imagine. I don't think you can. Not really, but that's okay. She laughed softly. You offered me cheap tacos in a text message last night. Do you remember? I remember. No one has offered me cheap tacos in 20 years. Everyone wants to take me to Michelin-starred restaurants to be seen with me in places that matter. But you offered me $5 tacos in your kitchen with your daughter, and it was the most genuine invitation I've received in a decade. A pause. I'm not trying to disrupt your life, Ethan. I'm just trying to hold on to the one connection I've made that feels real. Something in Ethan's chest loosened, the anger and fear making space for understanding. She wasn't trying to use him or elevate him or make him part of her empire. She was just lonely, just human, just desperate for connection in a world that had taught her to keep everyone at arm's length. The offer still stands, he said quietly. When this dies down, when it's safe, you're welcome to those tacos. As friends. Nothing more complicated than that. Friends? She said the word like she was testing its weight. I don't have many of those. Then you're overdue. Fair warning, I'm terrible at friendship. I work too much, I overthink everything, and I've been told I'm emotionally unavailable. Fair warning, I have a 9-year-old who will ask you a million questions and judge whether you're worthy based entirely on how you respond. And I go to bed at 10 p.m. because I'm old and tired. That pulled a real laugh from her, bright and surprised. We sound like a disaster waiting to happen. Or maybe just two people figuring out how to be human again. I like that better. He could hear the smile in her voice. Okay, friends, when this blows over, I'm taking you up on those tacos. I'll hold you to it. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing and everything, her board meeting that afternoon, where she'd had to defend every decision from the past quarter, his ongoing battle to get Maddie to eat vegetables, the absurdity of corporate politics and single parenthood, and the ways life never quite went according to plan. It was easy, Ethan realized, talking to her without the weight of titles and expectations. Just two people sharing the mundane frustrations of their very different lives, finding common ground in the shared experience of being human. When they finally hung up, he felt lighter somehow, less alone in the chaos. The reporters were still out there, the gossip still swirling, Jenkins and the board still circling like sharks. But somewhere in the middle of it, he'd found an unexpected ally, someone who understood what it meant to put on armor every day and long for a moment when you could take it off. He powered off his phone entirely and let himself drift towards sleep, Maddie safe in the next room and the city quiet beyond his windows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new tests of his resolve, but tonight he'd protected his daughter and made a friend and remembered that kindness, even when it cost you, was never wasted. Sarah would have been proud. That thought carried him down into dreams that were, for once, peaceful. The story died faster than anyone expected. By Friday, the Business Journal had quietly shelved their expose, and the gossip mill at Rowan Industries had moved on to more fertile ground. A senior VP caught fudging expense reports, a merger rumor that sent the stock price jumping, the usual corporate drama that fed the ecosystem of whispers and speculation. Ethan returned to his comfortable obscurity, the logistics manager who left at 5:30 and kept his head down. People still glanced at him occasionally, still whispered when he passed in hallways, but the sharp edge of curiosity had dulled. He was becoming old news, which was exactly what he wanted. Except for the texts from Isabel. Those hadn't stopped. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that would raise eyebrows if anyone saw them. Just small exchanges scattered throughout each day. A photo of her coffee cup with the caption, "Fourth cup, send help." His response, "Switch to decaf. Your heart will thank you." Her reply, "Decaf is a lie we tell ourselves to feel virtuous." Or she'd ask his opinion on something mundane. What color should she paint her home office? Was it worth watching the new documentary everyone was talking about? Did he know any good books about grief because she was finally ready to process her divorce? He'd answer honestly, without the careful corporate language everyone else used with her, and she seemed to appreciate that. 3 weeks after the gala, she texted him at lunchtime. "I'm in a meeting that should have been an email. Tell me something interesting to keep me awake." He was eating a sandwich in his car, enjoying the November sun through the windshield. Maddie informed me this morning that she wants to be a volcanologist when she grows up. This is her third career choice this month. What were the other two? Astronaut and penguin researcher. She's keeping her options open. Smart kid. I wanted to be a ballerina until I was 12 and realized I had no rhythm and hated tutus. What changed your mind? My father took me to his office and showed me what real power looked like. I forgot about tutus pretty quickly after that. That's kind of sad. Is it? I built an empire. Most little girls who want to be ballerinas end up in office jobs anyway. At least I skipped the disillusionment phase. Still sad. Every kid should get to dream without someone showing them the harsh reality. There was a long pause. Then, "You're right, it is sad. I never thought about it that way." The conversations continued like that over the days that followed. Small windows into each other's lives, brief moments of connection in the midst of their separate routines. Ethan found himself looking forward to the texts, to the way Isabel's sharp wit softened when she wasn't performing for an audience. She was funny, he discovered, self-deprecating in ways that suggested deep insecurity hidden under layers of achievement, curious about his life in ways that felt genuine rather than polite. And slowly, without either of them quite planning it, she became part of his day. Not in any grand way, just in the small spaces. A text during his lunch break, a question while he was helping Maddie with homework, a good night message that came after she'd left her office, but before he fell asleep. 4 weeks after the gala, on a gray Tuesday morning when Chicago's winter had finally arrived with bitter cold and the threat of snow, Ethan found a note on his desk. Not a text, not an email, but an actual handwritten note on heavy cream stationery that probably cost more per sheet than his entire notepad. My office is being renovated next week, something about upgrading the HVAC system. I'll be working from various conference rooms, which means I'll actually see how the rest of the company operates. If you're free Thursday around 2, I'd like to buy you coffee in the cafeteria. As friends. No agenda, just coffee and whatever conversation happens. IR. Ethan read it 3 times, aware that Marcus was watching him from across the aisle with undisguised curiosity. Coffee in the cafeteria wasn't private, wasn't secret. It was public, visible, a statement that whatever existed between them was innocent enough to happen in front of the entire company. He pulled out his phone and texted, "Coffee sounds good, but I'm buying. You bought the fancy stationery." Her response came immediately. "Deal. See you Thursday." Thursday arrived with the first real snowfall of the season, fat flakes that transformed Chicago into something gentler and quieter than its usual harsh self. Ethan spent the morning rerouting shipments around weather delays and trying not to think about coffee at 2 p.m., about what it meant that Isabel wanted to be seen with him, about how the simple act of sharing a cup of coffee had become complicated by context and history and the weight of other people's assumptions. At 1:55, he headed to the cafeteria, a vast space on the third floor where employees from every department mixed during lunch and breaks. It was mostly empty now, the lunch rush long past, just a few scattered groups and individuals nursing coffee and avoiding returning to their desks. Isabel was already there, sitting at a table by the windows, her laptop open but ignored in front of her. She wore black slacks and a soft gray sweater instead of her usual armor of suits and silk, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger like this, more approachable, more real. She saw him and smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. Right on time. Very logistics of you. Punctuality is next to godliness. Ethan gestured to her empty hands. I thought we were getting coffee. We are. I was waiting for you. Didn't want to be that person sitting alone with 2 cups looking pathetic. They walked to the coffee station together, and Ethan was acutely aware of the heads turning, the conversations pausing mid-sentence. Here was the CEO in the cafeteria with the logistics manager everyone had gossiped about. The story they thought had died was suddenly resurrected by their mere proximity. They're staring, Isabel murmured as she poured coffee into a paper cup. Let them. We're just 2 colleagues having coffee. Are we? Just colleagues? She glanced at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. Because it feels like more than that. Not romantically, she added quickly, but more than the usual professional relationship. Friends, Ethan said firmly. Like we agreed, friends can have coffee without it meaning anything more. In a normal workplace, sure, but this isn't a normal workplace, and I'm not a normal colleague. She added cream to her coffee, stirring slowly. Everything I do is scrutinized. Every relationship is analyzed for advantage or weakness. Even this, she gestured between them. Even having coffee with you will be dissected and theorized and turned into something it's not. Then let's give them the most boring story possible. 2 people drinking mediocre cafeteria coffee and talking about the weather. That pulled a laugh from her. You're very good at deflating drama. Years of practice with a 9-year-old who thinks everything is the end of the world. They returned to her table by the windows where snow continued to fall in lazy spirals. For a moment they just sat in comfortable silence, watching the city disappear under white. Then Isabel spoke, her voice quiet. I never thanked you properly. For that night, yes, but also for everything after. For not letting them turn it into something ugly. For protecting me when you had no reason to. I had plenty of reasons. Basic human decency chief among them. Still, most people would have leveraged it, used it as social capital, or traded it for advancement. She shook her head. You just went back to your life like nothing happened. I don't think I've ever met anyone quite like you. I'm very boring, Ethan said. Ask anyone in logistics. You're anything but boring. You're just real, unimpressed by things that impress everyone else. It's refreshing. She sipped her coffee, made a face. This is terrible. Cafeteria coffee usually is. Want to go somewhere better? No, this is perfect, she smiled. Terrible coffee in a mostly empty cafeteria with someone who doesn't want anything from me. This is the best part of my week. The admission hung between them, sad and honest. Ethan thought about her life, the glass house, the empire, the constant performance of power, how lonely it must be to always wonder about people's motives, to never be sure if someone liked you or just liked what you could do for them. Tell me about Maddie, Isabel said suddenly. You mention her in text, but I want to hear the real stories, the ones that make you smile when you think about them. So Ethan told her about Maddie's obsession with volcanoes and space and penguins, about the time she'd tried to adopt a stray cat and hidden it in her room for 3 days before he'd found it, about parent-teacher conferences where her teachers praised her curiosity and gently suggested she learn to raise her hand instead of just blurting out answers, about bedtime negotiations and Saturday morning pancakes, and the way she still slept with the elephant Sarah had given her before she was born. Isabel listened with complete attention, asking questions, laughing at the funny parts, her expression softening in ways Ethan suspected she didn't let happen often. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, turning her coffee cup in slow circles. You're a good father, she said finally. Maddie's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She keeps me honest, keeps me grounded, reminds me what actually matters. which is love, connection, being present for the people who need you. He met her gaze. Not success or achievement or any of the things we're taught to chase, just being there, showing up, making someone feel seen and valued and safe. Something shifted in Isabel's expression, a crack in the professional veneer. I don't have that. Anyone who needs me, I mean. No kids, no partner, no family, beyond some distant cousins I haven't spoken to in years. When I die, the company will mourn for about 15 minutes until they figure out who's taking my office. That's not true, isn't it? Who would miss me, Ethan? Really miss me, not my position or my power or what I could have done for their career. The question was so raw, so honest, that Ethan felt it like a physical thing. He thought about his answer carefully, knowing she'd hear any platitude, any false comfort. I would, he said finally. Not because of your position or your company, but because you're funny and smart and you're trying really hard to figure out how to be human again. That's worth something. That's worth a lot. Isabel's eyes went bright, and for a moment Ethan thought she might cry. Instead, she laughed, shaky and surprised. You're very dangerous, you know that? You say things that make me want to believe them. Then believe them. Not everything has to be strategy or suspicion. Sometimes people just mean what they say. In your world, maybe. In mine, she stopped, shook her head. No, you're right. I'm so used to assuming ulterior motives that I've forgotten how to trust anyone. Trust is earned. Give me time. Is that what we're doing? Building trust? I think we're building a friendship. Trust is just part of that. She smiled then, genuine and warm, and Ethan saw clearly what everyone else missed. Under the armor and the achievements and the carefully maintained image was just a person who wanted what everyone wanted, to be known, to be valued, to matter to someone for reasons that had nothing to do with what she could provide. They talked for another hour, the cafeteria gradually filling with the afternoon coffee crowd. People continued to stare, to whisper, but the scrutiny felt less important somehow. They were just two people having a conversation, finding common ground despite the vast differences in their circumstances. Isabel told him about the board meeting from hell, where she'd had to defend every decision from the past quarter, about her father's impossible standards and her mother who'd left when Isabel was 12 to find herself in California, about Robert, her ex-husband, and how she'd known within 3 years that she'd married the wrong person but had stayed for 12 more because admitting failure felt impossible. Ethan told her about Sarah, really told her, not just the sanitized version he gave most people. About their first date at a terrible Italian restaurant where the pasta was overcooked and the wine was cheap, but they'd laughed until their sides hurt. About her pregnancy with Maddie, how terrified they'd both been but also wildly excited. About the last conversation they'd had before the accident, something mundane about what to have for dinner, and how he'd replay it endlessly in his mind, wishing he'd said something more meaningful. You couldn't have known, Isabel said softly. That's the thing about last conversations. We never know they're last until they are. I know, but knowing doesn't make it easier. Does it get easier? The grief? It changes. Becomes part of you instead of consuming you. Some days I can think about her and smile. Other days, he stopped, surprised by how much he was sharing. Other days it still feels like drowning. 5 years, Isabel said. That's how long it's been? 5 years next month. Maddie doesn't remember her very well anymore, just fragments and feelings. That's the part that kills me. That Sarah is becoming a story I tell instead of a person Maddie knows. But you keep her alive through those stories, through raising Maddie with her values, her humor, her love. That's not nothing. No, Ethan agreed. It's not nothing. They fell into silence, watching the snow accumulate on the window ledge. The cafeteria had filled considerably, the usual afternoon rush of people seeking caffeine and escape from their desks. Ethan caught Marcus watching from across the room, his expression speculative but not unkind. I should get back to work, Isabel said finally, though she made no move to leave. I have a 3 p.m. with Tokyo that's going to be painful. How's that expansion going? Slowly, lots of bureaucratic red tape and cultural misunderstandings. We'll get there, but it's exhausting. She closed her laptop, began gathering her things. This was nice. The coffee, the conversation, just, she gestured vaguely, being normal for an hour. Same time next week? She looked up, surprised. Really? If you want, I'm here every Thursday at 2 anyway. Might as well have company. I'd like that. She stood, slinging her laptop bag over her shoulder. And Ethan? Thank you for seeing me. Not the CEO, not the position, just me. Any time. He watched her walk away, her posture straightening with each step, the armor clicking back into place as she prepared to return to her empire. But for an hour, she'd been just Isabel, drinking terrible coffee and sharing honest stories with someone who didn't want anything except her company. That night, after Maddie was asleep and the house was quiet, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text. I haven't felt that normal in years. Thank you for not making it weird or transactional or anything other than what it was. IR. He replied, That's what friends do. See you next Thursday. It's a date, a friend date, a platonic coffee date with terrible beverages and mediocre company. Speak for yourself. My company is excellent. Humble too. It's one of my best qualities. She sent back a laughing emoji, and Ethan smiled at his phone like an idiot. This was dangerous territory, he knew. Getting close to someone whose world was so different from his, whose problems operated on a scale he couldn't fathom. But there was something about Isabel's vulnerability, her hunger for genuine connection, that made him want to try. The Thursday coffee meetings became routine. Sometimes they talked about work, sometimes about Maddie and the latest drama from her school, sometimes about nothing, just comfortable silence punctuated by observations about the weather or the terrible coffee or the odd characters who populated the cafeteria. In the spaces between Thursdays, they texted. Nothing profound, just the small exchanges of people learning to be friends. She'd send him articles she thought he'd find interesting. He'd share photos of Maddie's latest art project or the dinner he'd managed not to burn. It was easy, natural, the kind of friendship that built itself without effort or strategy. 6 weeks after that first cafeteria coffee, Isabel texted him on a Saturday morning. Weird question. What are you doing today? Grocery shopping, playground time, the usual weekend parent stuff. Why? I'm going stir-crazy in my house. Too much silence, too much thinking. Would it be completely inappropriate if I asked to tag along to your normal Saturday? Not as CEO, just as a person who needs to remember what normal life looks like. Ethan stared at the message, considering. This was different from cafeteria coffee, from texts and brief conversations. This was inviting her into his actual life, into Maddie's world. It crossed lines that probably shouldn't be crossed, blurred boundaries that existed for good reasons. But he remembered her admission. When I die, the company will mourn for about 15 minutes. He thought about loneliness, about what it costs to build empires while forgetting to build a life. He typed, Grocery shopping is boring, playground might be cold, and Maddie will ask you 1,000 questions. Fair warning, I'll take those odds. Okay, but we're going to the discount store, not Whole Foods, and I use coupons. Even better, I haven't used a coupon in 20 years. Then you're in for a treat. Meet us at the Lincoln Park playground at 10. Wear warm clothes and comfortable shoes. This is not a designer outfit activity. See you at 10. Ethan set his phone down and immediately questioned his judgment. This was a terrible idea. Isabel Rowan at a public playground, grocery shopping at the discount store with him and Maddie. People would see. People would talk. The gossip mill that had finally quieted would roar back to life. But when he told Maddie that morning that a friend might join them at the playground, her face lit up with uncomplicated joy. A friend? A grown-up friend or a kid friend? A grown-up friend, someone from work. Is it the lady you helped? The important one? Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. Yes. Cool, can we bring the good frisbee? That was Maddie's only concern, whether they'd bring the good frisbee or the cheap one that didn't fly straight. No complications, no suspicions, just simple childhood priorities. Ethan wished he could bottle that innocence and keep it safe from the world that would eventually teach her to question everyone's motives. They arrived at the playground at 9:55. Maddie racing ahead to claim her favorite swing, while Ethan carried the frisbee and a thermos of hot chocolate. The morning was bright and cold, the sky that piercing blue that only came after snowfall, the playground equipment dusted with white. Isabel appeared at exactly 10, wearing jeans and a puffy winter coat and boots that looked expensive but practical. Her hair was in a simple ponytail, her face free of the makeup she wore to work. She looked nervous, Ethan realized. Actually nervous, like someone showing up to their first day of school. "Hi," she said, slightly breathless. "I'm not late, am I?" "Right on time." He gestured to where Maddie was swinging, pumping her legs to go higher. "Fair warning, she's been talking about you all morning. Prepare for interrogation. I can handle 9-year-olds. Famous last words. Maddie spotted them and jumped off the swing mid-arc, landing in the snow and running over with the fearless energy of children everywhere. She skidded to a stop in front of Isabel, studying her with frank curiosity. "You're the important lady," Maddie announced. "And you're Maddie," Isabel replied, crouching down to Maddie's eye level. "Your dad talks about you all the time." "Good things?" "The best things. He said you want to be a volcanologist." "Yeah, or maybe an astronaut, or both. I haven't decided yet." Maddie tilted her head. "What do you do?" "I run a company. We move things around the world." "Like trucks and boats?" "Exactly like trucks and boats, and planes and trains, too." "That's cool. Do you have a favorite dinosaur?" The question was so quintessentially Maddie that Ethan had to suppress a laugh. Isabel, to her credit, didn't miss a beat. "Stegosaurus." "Because of the plates on their backs." "Good choice. Mine's Velociraptor because they're smart and fast." Maddie grabbed Isabel's hand with the casual trust of children. "Do you want to swing? Or we could play frisbee. Daddy brought the good one." And just like that, Isabel was drafted into their Saturday morning routine. They played frisbee until Ethan's arm ached, the disc soaring in wobbly arcs across the playground while Maddie narrated her throws like a sports commentator. Isabel was terrible at frisbee, her throws going wildly off course, but she laughed every time and never once checked her phone or looked bored. After an hour, they retreated to a bench to drink hot chocolate. Maddie wedged between Ethan and Isabel, chattering about school and her friends and the book she was reading about a girl who discovered she was secretly a dragon. "Are you married?" Maddie asked suddenly, with the bluntness children wielded like a weapon. "Maddie," Ethan warned, but Isabel shook her head. "It's okay. No, I'm not married anymore. I was, but it didn't work out." "That's sad. My mom died, so my dad's not married either." Maddie stated it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "But Daddy says that's okay because we have each other." "Your dad's right. Having each other is what matters most." "Do you have kids?" "No, I don't." "Why not?" "Maddie, that's enough questions," Ethan interjected, but Isabel smiled. "I was too busy working. I spent all my time building my company and forgot to build a family." She glanced at Ethan, then back at Maddie. "But your dad reminded me that it's never too late to make friends, so I'm working on that now." "Good. Friends are important. Emma says you need at least 3 good friends or you'll be lonely. I have 7, so I'm definitely not lonely." 7 is an excellent number, Isabel agreed solemnly. They finished their hot chocolate and headed to the grocery store, Maddie claiming the front seat of the cart like a throne. Isabel pushed, insisted on pushing actually, clearly delighted by this mundane task, while Maddie navigated and Ethan consulted his list and clipped coupons. The discount store was a far cry from wherever Isabel normally shopped. Harsh fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, the smell of produce and cleaning supplies. But she seemed fascinated by everything. The price comparisons, the coupon strategy, the way Ethan calculated cost per ounce to find the best deals. "You're really good at this," she observed, as he debated between 2 brands of pasta sauce. "Years of practice. When you're on a budget, every dollar matters." "I've forgotten what that's like, having to choose between things because you can't have everything." "It's not so bad. Makes you appreciate what you have." They filled the cart with the week's groceries. Nothing exotic, nothing expensive, just the basics that would feed Ethan and Maddie for 7 days. At checkout, Isabel watched him organize items by coupon, watched the total drop with each scanned discount, and looked genuinely impressed when he saved $43. "That was like a game," she said as they loaded bags into his car, "trying to maximize value within constraints." "Welcome to budget shopping. It's a thrill a minute." "I'm not being sarcastic. I actually enjoyed that. The strategy of it, the optimization." She smiled. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals with less satisfaction than saving $43 on groceries. Maddie, strapped into her booster seat, leaned forward. Are you coming to our house for lunch? Daddy's making grilled cheese. Ethan froze. This was the line, the boundary that shouldn't be crossed. Grocery stores and playgrounds were public, visible, explainable. But inviting Isabel into their home, into the intimate space where he and Maddie built their life, that was different. That was personal in ways that couldn't be undone. I don't want to impose, Isabel said carefully, reading his hesitation. You're not imposing, Maddie insisted. We have plenty of cheese, and Daddy makes really good grilled cheese. The bread gets crispy and the cheese gets melty, and it's the best. Isabel looked at Ethan, the question clear in her eyes. Is this okay? Are we crossing too many lines? He thought about her admission that she'd go stir-crazy in her glass house, about loneliness and connection and the simple act of sharing a meal with people who saw you as a person rather than a position, about how Maddie's enthusiasm was genuine, uncomplicated by corporate politics or social calculation. We do have plenty of cheese, he said finally, if you want to come. I want to come, Isabel said quietly, if that's really okay. It's really okay. The drive to his house felt significant somehow, as if they were crossing an invisible threshold into territory none of them had fully mapped. Ethan's neighborhood was modest, small houses with small yards, cars that ran but weren't new, the working-class comfort of people who paid their bills and lived their lives without excess or extravagance. His house looked particularly humble as he pulled into the driveway. The siding that needed paint, the gutter he kept meaning to fix, the lawn furniture still sitting out even though it was November. Isabel's glass house probably had more square footage in her living room than his entire first floor, but if she judged, she didn't show it. She simply helped carry groceries inside, following Maddie's chattering tour of their home. Ethan watched her take in the mismatched furniture from 3 different decades, the photos of Sarah scattered throughout, Maddie's artwork covering the refrigerator like wallpaper. This is lovely, Isabel said, and she meant it. He could tell. It feels like a home, like people actually live here and love each other. As opposed to my place, which feels like a museum, beautiful but empty, nothing out of place because nothing's ever used. While Ethan made grilled cheese, Isabel sat at the kitchen table with Maddie, helping with a puzzle of the solar system. He listened to their conversation, Maddie explaining facts about each planet with varying degrees of accuracy, Isabel asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. This was surreal, he thought, as he buttered bread and heated the griddle. Isabel Rowan, CEO of a billion-dollar company, sitting at his scratched kitchen table doing a puzzle with his daughter while he made lunch. If someone had told him 6 weeks ago that this would be his Saturday, he would have laughed. But here they were, and it felt right in ways that defied logic. Natural, easy, like Isabel had always been meant to fit into this space they'd carved out of grief and routine. They ate at the table, grilled cheese cut into triangles the way Maddie liked, with tomato soup from a can and apple slices because Ethan was trying to sneak fruit into every meal. Isabel ate like she'd never tasted anything better, praising the crispy bread and melty cheese with enthusiasm that made Maddie glow with pride. After lunch, Maddie dragged Isabel upstairs to see her room, to show off her rock collection and her telescope and all the accumulated treasures of 9 years of life. Ethan stayed downstairs, giving them space, cleaning up the lunch dishes and trying to process what was happening. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Dude, just saw a photo on Facebook. Is that really Isabel Rowan at Lincoln Park Playground throwing a frisbee with you and a kid? So it had begun. The photos, the gossip, the speculation. Ethan typed back. She's a friend spending time with friends, that's all. That's all? That's Isabel Rowan, at a public playground. This is going to be everywhere by Monday. Let it. We're not doing anything wrong. I know, just giving you a heads up. People are already talking. Ethan pocketed his phone and returned to the kitchen, where he could hear Maddie's voice floating down from upstairs, explaining the difference between igneous and sedimentary rocks, with the passionate intensity she brought to all her interests. 20 minutes later, they came back downstairs, Maddie holding Isabel's hand like they'd been friends for years rather than hours. Can Isabel come back next Saturday? Maddie asked. I want to show her my science project when it's done. Ethan looked at Isabel, saw the hope in her eyes mixed with uncertainty. That's up to her. She's pretty busy. I'm never too busy for friends, Isabel said softly. If the invitation's open, I'd love to come back. It's open, Ethan confirmed, knowing even as he said it that they were cementing something that couldn't be easily undone. This wasn't just Thursday coffee anymore. This was real friendship, the kind that existed outside office walls and came with expectations and vulnerability and risk. But it also came with something neither of them had enough of, genuine connection. Someone to share grilled cheese with, someone who didn't want anything except company and conversation. In a world of transaction and performance, that felt revolutionary. Isabel left an hour later, thanking them both for the best Saturday she'd had in years. Ethan walked her to her car, a sleek BMW that looked ridiculous parked on his street next to rusty pickups and aging sedans. Thank you, she said before getting in, for including me, for letting me be normal for a few hours. Thank you for throwing terrible frisbee and eating grilled cheese without complaining about the processed cheese. She laughed. The processed cheese was perfect. Everything was perfect. She paused, her hand on the car door. Are we crazy? Doing this? Probably. But you don't regret it? Not even a little. Good. Neither do I. She got in the car, started the engine, then rolled down the window. See you Thursday? Wouldn't miss it. He watched her drive away, then returned inside to find Maddie sprawled on the couch, exhausted from the day's excitement. I like her, Maddie announced. She's nice. And she didn't talk to me like I was a baby. Some grown-ups do that. She is nice. Under all the important CEO stuff, she's just a person who needs friends. Then I'm glad she's our friend. Maddie yawned, snuggling into the couch cushions. Can we watch a movie? Sure, baby. Pick whatever you want. While Maddie queued up some animated film about talking animals, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Isabel. Your daughter is wonderful. Your home is wonderful. Your grilled cheese is wonderful. Thank you for reminding me that wonderful doesn't have to be complicated or expensive, just real. He replied, come back anytime. The door's always open. Careful. I might take you up on that more often than you expect. I'm counting on it. As the movie started and Maddie provided running commentary on every scene, Ethan realized something had fundamentally shifted. Isabel wasn't just the CEO anymore, wasn't just someone he'd helped one night. She was becoming a part of his life, woven into the fabric of his Saturdays and his daughter's world. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. And when his phone buzzed one more time with a simple message, thank you for seeing me, he understood that whatever they were building, it mattered. To both of them, more than either probably wanted to admit. Outside, snow began falling again, covering Chicago in fresh white. Inside, his home felt warmer somehow, fuller, like it had expanded to make room for one more person who needed a place to belong. The photographs hit the internet Sunday morning. Someone at the playground had captured Isabel mid-throw, her face lit with laughter as the frisbee sailed wildly off course. Another showed her pushing Maddie in the grocery cart, both of them grinning like conspirators. A third caught all three of them walking to Ethan's car, looking for all the world like a family on a routine weekend outing. By noon, they were everywhere. Reddit threads dissecting every angle. Twitter speculation ranging from wholesome to salacious. The Chicago Business Journal, having lost their original story, now had a new one. CEO Isabel Rowan spotted with mystery man and child in surprising display of normalcy. Ethan's phone exploded. Text messages from colleagues, missed calls from reporters, even a voicemail from his mother in Florida asking if he was dating someone and why hadn't he mentioned it. He ignored most of it, but when Jenkins from Executive Relations called 3 times in a row, he knew avoidance wasn't an option. We need to talk, Jenkins said without preamble when Ethan finally answered. Monday morning, first thing. My office. About what? Don't play stupid, Cole. About the photographs, about whatever relationship you've developed with Ms. Rowan, about the optics of this situation. We went to a playground and grocery shopping. There's nothing to discuss. There's plenty to discuss, 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. Jenkins hung up before Ethan could respond. Ethan stood in his kitchen, still in his pajamas, coffee growing cold in his hand. Maddie was upstairs, blissfully unaware that yesterday's fun day had become today's scandal. He should have known this would happen. Should have been more careful, more discreet. Should have remembered that in Isabel's world, nothing was private, nothing was simple. His phone buzzed. A text from Isabel. I'm so sorry. I didn't think anyone would care about playground frisbee. My PR team is in damage control mode. Jenkins wants to meet with you tomorrow. I know. I'll be there too. He typed back. You don't need to do that. Yes, I do. This is my fault. I asked to come. I dragged you and Maddie into public scrutiny. The least I can do is face the consequences with you. What consequences? We didn't do anything wrong. In a rational world, no. In corporate politics, appearances matter more than truth. Jenkins is going to push for distance between us. The board will demand it. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Distance. The end of Thursday coffees and Saturday adventures. The end of watching Isabel slowly remember how to be human instead of just powerful. The end of whatever fragile friendship they'd built in the spaces between their very different lives. Then we fight back, he typed. We tell them the truth, that we're friends. That friendship isn't a scandal. You don't understand how this works. They'll make it ugly. They'll suggest things that aren't true until people believe them. They'll use this against me. Proof that my judgment is compromised, that I'm not fit to lead. Are you willing to throw away our friendship to appease people who want to control you? The response took a long time coming. When it did, it was just 2 words. I don't know. Ethan set his phone down and stared out the window at his snow-covered yard, at the swing set he'd installed for Maddie 3 years ago, at the ordinary life he'd built from the wreckage of before. He'd learned the hard way that the people who mattered most were the ones who stayed when things got difficult. Sarah had taught him that. Maddie reinforced it every day. The question was whether Isabel had learned the same lesson, or if the armor she'd built was too thick to let friendship penetrate when it became inconvenient. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, Chicago wrapped in clouds that threatened more snow. Ethan dropped Maddie at school early. She'd heard about the photos from Emma, whose mother had apparently shown her the viral CEO on Facebook, but Maddie's only concern was whether people thought Isabel's frisbee throwing was as bad as it actually was. Tell her she needs to practice more, Maddie had said seriously. Maybe YouTube has tutorials. If only all problems could be solved with YouTube tutorials. Jenkins's office was on the executive floor 3 doors down from Isabel's. Ethan arrived at exactly 9 a.m. to find Isabel already there, sitting ramrod straight in one of the leather chairs facing Jenkins' desk. She wore her armor today, severe black suit, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, the Ice Queen expression that could freeze blood. But when she saw Ethan, something flickered in her eyes. Relief, maybe, or fear. He couldn't tell. Mr. Cole, please sit. Jenkins gestured to the chair beside Isabel. I'm sure you both know why we're here. The photographs, Isabel said, her voice flat and professional, which showed 2 colleagues spending time together outside of work. Hardly scandalous. 2 colleagues with a significant power differential, Jenkins corrected, a CEO and a mid-level manager. You must see how this looks, Ms. Rowan, especially given the circumstances of your initial contact, a late-night car ride after you were intoxicated. Now, public outings with his child? The optics are terrible. The optics are only terrible if you insist on seeing something inappropriate where nothing exists. Isabel's tone could cut glass. Ethan is my friend. We have coffee sometimes. We spent one Saturday together in public places doing completely innocent activities. Since when is friendship a corporate violation? Since the friend in question is your subordinate. Since questions arise about favoritism, about whether your personal feelings might influence professional decisions. Jenkins pulled out a folder, opened it with deliberate precision. I've reviewed Mr. Cole's performance records. Solid employee, no complaints, but also no exceptional achievements that would warrant special attention from executive leadership. Yet suddenly he has unprecedented access to you. One has to wonder what's really happening here. Ethan felt anger flash hot and bright. What's really happening is that I helped her when she needed help, and we discovered we get along. That's it. No favors requested, no advantages gained, just 2 people who became friends. Can you prove that? Can you prove she hasn't offered you promotions, raises, insider information? Can you prove this relationship, whatever you want to call it, hasn't influenced company decisions? Can you prove it has? Ethan shot back. Because from where I'm sitting, you're building a case out of suspicion and innuendo with zero evidence of actual wrongdoing. Jenkins smiled that cold, empty smile. Evidence isn't always necessary when perception does the work for you. The board is concerned, Mr. Cole. They're concerned that Ms. Rowan's judgment has been compromised, that she's formed an inappropriate attachment that could affect her leadership. These photographs only confirm those concerns. Then the board can take their concerns and, Isabel started, but Jenkins cut her off. The board can vote to remove you as CEO, which they're currently discussing. He let that land like a bomb. They've called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. The photographs were the final straw. Combined with your intoxication at the gala, your defensive posture regarding Mr. Cole, your increasingly erratic behavior, they're questioning whether you're still the right person to lead this company. The room went silent. Ethan looked at Isabel and saw her carefully constructed mask crack, just for a moment. Beneath it was shock, pain, and something that looked like defeat. Erratic behavior, she repeated quietly. I made one human mistake at a party. I made a friend who isn't impressed by my title. And for that, they want to remove me from the company I built? You didn't build it. Your father built it. You inherited it and grew it, yes, but I turned a struggling mid-size operation into a billion-dollar corporation. I increased profits by 300%, expanded into 17 countries, created thousands of jobs. My track record speaks for itself. Your track record is exemplary. Your recent judgment is questionable. Jenkins leaned forward. Here's what the board is proposing. Mr. Cole transfers to our Los Angeles office, effective immediately. You cease all personal contact with him. You attend mandatory counseling to address whatever personal issues led to these lapses in judgment. You issue a statement recommitting to professional boundaries. If you do these things, they'll table the removal vote. No, Isabel's voice was steel. Absolutely not. Then they'll likely vote to remove you. Is your pride really worth your entire career? This isn't about pride. This is about refusing to be controlled by people who think power means the right to dictate who I can be friends with. She turned to Ethan. I'm not asking you to move to Los Angeles. I'm not ending our friendship because they're uncomfortable with the fact that I'm human. Ms. Rowan, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. What's unreasonable is punishing someone for basic human connection. What's unreasonable is creating a world where CEOs aren't allowed to have friends unless those friends fit specific criteria. She stood, and the movement was so sudden, so decisive, that both men flinched. Schedule the vote. I'll defend myself to the board. If they choose to remove me, that's their decision. But I won't compromise my integrity or abandon my friend to keep a job that requires me to pretend I'm not human. Isabel, wait. Ethan stood too, his mind racing. You can't throw away everything you've built for what? For you? She turned to face him fully. Let me be clear. I'm not doing this for you, although you deserve better than to be used as a pawn in corporate politics. I'm doing this for me. Because I'm tired of living in a cage I built. Because the last 2 months since that night you drove me home have been the first time in 10 years I've felt like a person instead of a position. Because if I let them take that away, if I let them force me back into isolation and performance and perfect corporate behavior, then they've won. Then I've lost something more valuable than any job. Jenkins's expression was calculating. You're willing to risk your entire career for a friendship with a logistics manager? I'm willing to risk my career to prove that I'm more than just a CEO, that I have worth beyond what I can produce for shareholders, that friendship and connection and basic human decency matter more than optics and power plays. She looked at Ethan. He saw me at my worst and helped me anyway. He's never asked for anything, never tried to leverage our friendship, never treated me like a means to an end. That's rare. That's valuable. That's worth fighting for. Ethan felt something tight in his chest loosen, something he hadn't realized he'd been holding. You don't have to fight this battle, he said quietly. I can transfer. We can take a break from the friendship until things settle down. It's not worth losing everything. Yes, it is. Isabel's eyes were bright, fierce. Don't you see? If I give in to this, I'm admitting they're right, that I can't be trusted to make my own decisions about my own life. That I need handlers and controllers because I'm not capable of adult friendships without destroying my professional credibility. She turned back to Jenkins. Tell the board I'll see them at the meeting, and I'm bringing Ethan with me. That's highly unusual. I don't care. If they're going to judge me for having a friend, they can meet him. See for themselves that he's not some opportunist or scandal. Just a good man who's been a better friend to me in 2 months than most of the board has been in 10 years. Jenkins looked between them, clearly calculating whether this was a battle worth fighting. Finally, he sighed. Fine. The meeting is at 2 p.m. Conference room A. Don't be late. They left his office in tense silence, not speaking until they reached the elevator. When the doors closed and they were alone, Isabel sagged against the wall. I might have just ended my career, she said. You might have just saved your life, Ethan countered. The career you have now, it's killing you. Slowly, maybe, but definitely. If the board removes you, maybe that's not the worst thing. Easy for you to say. You're not the one losing everything. Neither are you. You're just losing a job that requires you to be someone you're not, that isolates you, that makes you miserable. He kept his voice gentle. Isabel, I've watched you over these past weeks. You're lighter when you're away from here. Freer. More yourself. Maybe losing this would actually give you the chance to figure out who you want to be instead of who you're supposed to be. I don't know how to be anything other than this. Then learn. You're brilliant, you're capable, you have resources most people can only dream of. You could do anything, be anything, build something new that doesn't require you to sacrifice your humanity. She laughed bitterly. Build what? Another empire? Another cage? Or build a life? Real connections, real purpose, real joy. Things that matter beyond quarterly profits and stock prices. The elevator reached the ground floor. They stepped out into the lobby, where morning chaos swirled. Employees rushing to meetings, delivery people hauling packages, the normal business of a Monday. Nobody noticed them. Nobody cared. Just two people having a conversation in a crowded space. If they fire me, Isabel said quietly, I won't have anything. No job, no purpose, no identity beyond former CEO who lost it all for a friendship. You'll have yourself. You'll have the freedom to figure out what you actually want. You'll have friends, me, Maddie, whoever else you let in once you're not performing all the time. Ethan touched her arm gently. And that's not nothing. That's actually everything. She looked at him with those ice blue eyes, and he saw the fear there, the uncertainty. But also something else, hope, maybe? Or at least the possibility of hope. I need to prepare for the meeting, she said. Gather evidence of my performance, testimonials, anything that proves I'm still fit to lead. Or you could just tell them the truth, that you're human, you made some human choices, and those choices don't negate 10 years of exceptional leadership. The truth rarely wins in boardrooms. Then maybe it's time to change that. She studied him for a long moment, then smiled, tired but genuine. You're either very wise or very naive. Probably both. I'm glad you're coming to the meeting. I need someone there who sees me instead of just evaluating me. I'll be there, whatever happens. They parted ways, Isabel to her office to prepare, Ethan back to logistics to pretend to work while his mind churned with worst-case scenarios. By lunch, the entire company knew about the emergency board meeting. The speculation was wild, ranging from Isabel's imminent firing to a complete board overhaul to conspiracy theories about hostile takeovers and corporate espionage. Marcus cornered Ethan in the break room. Tell me you're not the reason she's getting fired. I'm not the reason. Corporate politics and unreasonable expectations are the reason. But the photos are photos of two friends having a normal Saturday. That's it. If the board wants to make it more than that, that's their dysfunction, not ours. Man, you've got guts. Going up against the board for friendship? I'm not going up against anyone. I'm just refusing to apologize for being decent to another human being. At 1:45, Ethan headed to the executive floor. Conference room A was the largest, most intimidating space in the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a massive table that could seat 30, and an atmosphere that practically vibrated with power and money. Isabel was already there, standing by the windows, her posture perfect, but her hands clenched at her sides. She wore the armor, The severe suit, the sharp heels, the expression that could freeze oceans. But Ethan could see the human underneath. The woman who'd laughed throwing terrible frisbee, who'd helped Maddie with a puzzle, who'd admitted she didn't know how to be anything except what was expected. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "Not even a little bit." She turned to face him. "Thank you for being here. I know this isn't your fight." "Yes, it is. They're attacking you for being my friend. That makes it my fight, too." The board members began filing in, 12 men and women in expensive suits, carrying leather portfolios and expressions of professional neutrality. Ethan recognized a few from company events, but most were strangers whose names he knew only from annual reports and business publications. They took their seats, a semicircle of judgment facing Isabel and Ethan. Jenkins sat at the far end, looking satisfied in the way cats looked after catching mice. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Theodore Winters, cleared his throat. "Ms. Rowan, thank you for joining us. And Mr. Cole, though your presence is unusual, we appreciate your cooperation." Winters folded his hands on the table. "I'll be direct. This board has concerns about your recent behavior and judgment. The incident at the gala, your increasingly visible relationship with Mr. Cole, the photographs from this weekend, individually, these might be overlooked. Together, they paint a picture of someone whose personal life is affecting professional performance." "With respect, Theodore, my personal life has never affected my professional performance." Isabel's voice was steady, controlled. "Every metric you care about, profits, growth, market share, employee satisfaction, has improved under my leadership. One instance of poor judgment at a party doesn't negate 10 years of success. It's not just the party, it's the pattern. The attachment to an employee significantly below your station. The public displays that invite scrutiny and gossip. The defensive posture when we raise legitimate concerns." Winters leaned forward. "We're not questioning your past achievements. We're questioning your current state of mind." "My state of mind is fine. What's not fine is the expectation that I sacrifice basic human connection to maintain some impossible standard of corporate perfection." Isabel's control was slipping, passion bleeding through the professional facade. "You want a CEO who's brilliant but not human, successful but not complicated, powerful but somehow also warm and relatable when it serves the company image. Those expectations are contradictory and unsustainable. No one is asking you to be perfect. Yes, you are. You're asking me to pretend I don't need friends, don't need support, don't need anything beyond work. You're asking me to be a symbol instead of a person, and I'm done with that." A woman near the middle, board member Chen, Ethan remembered, spoke up. "Miss Rowan, help us understand. What exactly is your relationship with Mr. Cole? Because from the outside it looks concerning. A CEO spending time with a lower-level employee, bringing him into her personal life, defending him when questions arise." "He's my friend," Isabel interrupted. "That's it. That's the whole story. We became friends after he helped me in a difficult moment. We have coffee sometimes. We spent one Saturday together doing completely innocent activities. There's no romance, no favoritism, no inappropriate conduct of any kind, just friendship. But don't you see how that looks? The power differential alone raises questions. About what? About whether I'm capable of having a friendship without it being transactional? About whether he's trying to use me for advancement?" Isabel gestured to Ethan. "Ask him. Ask him if I've ever offered him special treatment. Ask him if this friendship has benefited him professionally in any way." All eyes turned to Ethan. He stood, knowing this was his moment to either validate their concerns or prove them wrong. "I've received nothing from Isabel except friendship," he said clearly. "No promotions, no raises, no insider information, no special treatment of any kind. Our friendship exists entirely outside of work. She doesn't discuss company business with me. I don't ask for favors. We just—" He paused, searching for the right words. "We just see each other, really see each other. Not as CEO and employee, but as two people trying to figure out how to be human in a world that doesn't always make that easy." "That's a lovely sentiment, Mr. Cole, but it doesn't address the optics." "The optics are a reflection of your assumptions, not our actions," Ethan interrupted, his frustration finally breaking through. "You see a CEO and a low-level employee and immediately assume something inappropriate must be happening. You can't conceive of a friendship between people at different levels because you've created a system where connection is treated as weakness and vulnerability is punished. But that system is broken. It's making people like Isabel choose between being successful and being human, and that's not a choice anyone should have to make. Mr. Cole, we understand you're trying to defend your friend, but I'm not defending her. She doesn't need defending. Her record speaks for itself. I'm pointing out that your concerns say more about your worldview than her behavior. You're so focused on hierarchy and propriety that you've forgotten that at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to get through life without being completely alone. The room was silent. Ethan sat back down, his heart pounding. He'd probably just made things worse, probably just confirmed every concern they had about inappropriate closeness and poor judgment. But it needed to be said. Isabel reached over and squeezed his hand briefly, a gesture so small and quick that only Ethan noticed. But it was enough, a reminder that whatever happened next, they'd faced it together. Winters exchanged glances with other board members, some kind of silent communication passing between them. Finally, he spoke. Ms. Rowan, I think we need to take a brief recess. The board will discuss privately and reconvene in 30 minutes with our decision. Decision about what? Whether I keep my job because I made a friend? Decision about whether your recent behavior represents a temporary lapse or a fundamental change in your leadership approach that makes you unfit to continue as CEO. Isabel stood, her composure finally cracking. You want to know what's changed? I'll tell you. I remembered that I'm a person, that success without connection is hollow, that building an empire while forgetting to build a life is a waste of the time I've been given. Yes, my approach has changed. I'm no longer willing to sacrifice my humanity for your comfort. If that makes me unfit to lead this company, then maybe this company doesn't deserve the leadership I've provided. She walked out of the conference room, her heels clicking on marble, her back straight and proud. Ethan followed, catching up to her in the hallway. That was brave, he said. That was career suicide. She laughed, slightly hysterical. I just told the board I won't play by their rules anymore. They're going to vote me out. Everything I've built, gone. Or maybe they'll realize you're right, that their expectations are unreasonable, that you're still the best person to lead the company, friendship and all. You're an optimist. Someone has to be. They waited in Isabel's office, neither of them speaking much. The city sprawled below them, indifferent to their small drama. Ethan thought about what he'd said in the conference room about choosing between success and humanity. He'd meant it, but he also knew that in the real world, idealism didn't always win. When his phone buzzed with a text from Maddie's school, just a reminder about the science fair next week, reality crashed back in. He had a daughter waiting for him, a life beyond these corporate games. Whatever happened to Isabel, he'd be okay. He'd survived worse. But when he looked at Isabel, sitting at her desk staring at nothing, he realized that she wouldn't be okay. Not immediately. This job, this identity, this role, it was all she had. Losing it would destroy her carefully constructed world. Whatever they decide, he said quietly, you're going to be all right. How can you know that? Because you're more than this job. You always have been. You just forgot for a while. The 30 minutes stretched into 45, then an hour. Finally, Jenkins appeared at the door. They're ready for you. Back in the conference room, the board members wore expressions Ethan couldn't read. Winters waited until everyone was seated before speaking. Ms. Rowan, we've discussed your situation at length. The consensus is mixed. Some members feel your recent behavior represents unacceptable lapses in judgment. Others feel we're overreacting to what amounts to harmless personal choices. We're divided. So what does that mean? Isabel asked. It means we're not voting to remove you, not today, but we are implementing conditions on your continued leadership. Winters pulled out a document. First, you'll attend executive coaching focused on maintaining professional boundaries. Second, you'll implement clear separation between your personal and professional lives. No more public outings with subordinates that could be misconstrued. Third, you'll provide quarterly reports to the board on your relationships with employees, ensuring transparency and preventing any appearance of favoritism. Isabel stared at the document like it was a snake. You want me to report on my friendships? Monitor my personal life like I'm on probation? We want assurance that your personal choices won't negatively impact the company. These conditions are reasonable. These conditions are insulting. You're treating me like a child who can't be trusted to make adult decisions. She pushed the document back across the table. I won't agree to this. Then we'll have no choice but to vote on your removal. Then vote. Isabel stood, and Ethan had never seen her look more powerful. Because I'm not going to live under surveillance. I'm not going to submit quarterly reports on who I have coffee with. I'm not going to pretend that my worth as a CEO depends on my willingness to be isolated and controlled. Ms. Rowan, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You're the ones trying to micromanage my personal life because you're uncomfortable with the fact that I'm human. If that discomfort is so overwhelming that you need to remove me, then do it, but I won't compromise my dignity to ease your anxiety. The room erupted in whispered conversations, board members conferring with each other. Winters held up a hand for silence. Very well, we'll vote now. All in favor of removing Isabel Rowan as CEO. 6 hands went up, exactly half the board. All opposed? 6 more hands. A tie. As chairman, I have the deciding vote in the event of a tie. Winters looked at Isabel for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said something that shocked everyone in the room. I vote no. Ms. Rowan retains her position as CEO. The relief was so sudden, so overwhelming, that Ethan felt lightheaded. Beside him, Isabel swayed slightly, gripping the table for support. However, Winters continued, I want to be clear about why I'm voting this way. Not because I think your recent behavior is acceptable, but because I think the alternative, a CEO who's so controlled and isolated that she becomes brittle and eventually breaks, is worse. You've been an exceptional leader for this company, Ms. Rowan, but you've also been exhausting yourself trying to meet impossible standards. If having a friend helps you maintain your effectiveness and your sanity, then perhaps that's a reasonable trade-off. He stood, gathering his papers. But hear this. The board will be watching. Any hint that your personal relationships are affecting your professional judgment, and we'll revisit this decision. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Isabel said quietly. Good. Meeting adjourned. The board members filed out, some shooting disapproving glances at Isabel, others nodding with what might have been respect. When the room was empty except for Isabel and Ethan, she collapsed into a chair. I can't believe that just happened. Which part? The part where they tried to control your personal life, or the part where you told them no? The part where I nearly lost everything and somehow came out the other side. She looked up at him, her eyes wet. I almost threw it all away, for friendship, for the principle of the thing. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. It was both. Most important things are. She laughed through her tears. I don't know what happens now. How I'm supposed to lead a company where half the board thinks I'm unfit and the other half is only tolerating me conditionally. You do what you've always done. You show them they're wrong through your work. And you keep being human, keep having friends, keep refusing to let them turn you into a symbol instead of a person. That sounds exhausting. Probably. But less exhausting than pretending to be perfect. They sat in silence for a moment, the enormity of what had just happened settling over them. Then Isabel spoke, her voice soft. Thank you for standing with me, for saying the things I couldn't say, for reminding me that I'm more than just this job. That's what friends do. I've never had a friend like you. Well, now you do. Better get used to it. She smiled, genuine and warm and free of the corporate mask. Thursday coffee? Wouldn't miss it. And Saturday? Maddie mentioned something about a science fair? You really want to come to a 4th grade science fair? I really do. If the invitation still stands. It stands. Fair warning. There will be baking soda volcanoes and poster boards with too many glitter. Sounds perfect. They left the conference room together, walking through the office toward the elevator. People stared, whispered, but Ethan didn't care. They'd survived the worst. Everything else was just noise. At the elevator, Isabel paused. I meant what I said in there, about not being willing to sacrifice my humanity anymore. That wasn't just defiance, that was a promise to myself. To live differently, to choose differently, to remember that success without connection is empty. Good. Hold on to that. Don't let them convince you otherwise. I won't. Not anymore. She pressed the elevator button, then added, "You know what's funny? 2 months ago, if someone had told me that a logistics manager would help me remember who I am, I would have laughed. But here we are." Here we are. The elevator arrived. They stepped in together, and as the doors closed, Isabel said something that felt like the end of one story and the beginning of another. "I'm glad you didn't look away that night. I'm glad you saw me. I'm glad you let me." The months that followed were different. Isabel still ran her company with brilliance and determination, still commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals. But she also showed up for Thursday coffee without fail, came to Maddie's science fair, and cheered the loudest for the baking soda volcano, spent Saturday mornings at discount grocery stores learning the art of coupon clipping. The gossip eventually died. New scandals emerged to feed the corporate rumor mill. The photographs of that first Saturday became old news, replaced by newer, shinier stories. Ethan returned to his comfortable obscurity, and Isabel learned to build a life alongside her empire instead of in place of one. She still struggled sometimes. Old habits died hard, and the armor she'd worn for so long didn't disappear overnight. But she was trying. Learning to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to accept that being human meant being imperfect. One evening in late spring, 6 months after the gala that had started everything, Isabel joined them for dinner at Ethan's house. Just spaghetti and salad, nothing fancy, but Maddie had insisted on using the good plates, the ones from Target that weren't chipped. After dinner, while Maddie was upstairs doing homework, Isabel and Ethan sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over Chicago's sprawl. "I've been thinking," Isabel said, cradling a cup of tea, "about that night, about how close I came to just falling apart. If you hadn't been there, someone would have helped, eventually. Maybe. But they wouldn't have seen me. They would have seen the CEO having a bad night and either exploited it or hidden it. You saw a person who needed help. That made all the difference. You would have done the same." I don't know if I would have. The old me, the one who was so focused on control and success, I think she would have looked away, decided it wasn't her problem, worried about the optics. She set down her tea. But I'm not that person anymore. Or I'm trying not to be. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything. You were always capable of this. You just needed permission to stop performing. Well, thank you for the permission, and for the friendship, and for reminding me that kindness isn't weakness. It's the most important thing there is. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. Inside, Maddie's voice floated down, singing off-key to some song on the radio. The neighbor's dog barked at something imaginary. Life happened around them, ordinary and beautiful and enough. "You know what I realized?" Isabel said suddenly. "That night at the gala, I thought I needed to escape, needed to drink enough to forget how lonely and empty everything felt. But I wasn't escaping anything. I was just trying to feel something, anything, beyond the constant pressure to be perfect. And now? Now I feel things. Joy, frustration, connection, fear, all of it. And it's messy and complicated and sometimes overwhelming, but it's real. It's life. Not just existence, but actual life." She turned to him, her eyes bright. "You gave that to me. You and Maddie, and these simple, ordinary moments that turn out to be everything that matters. You gave something to us too. You showed Maddie that powerful people can also be kind, that success doesn't require sacrificing humanity, that friendship can exist across all kinds of boundaries if you're brave enough to build it. Is that what this is? Brave? The bravest thing I've seen. You risked everything, your career, your reputation, your identity, to prove that connection matters more than control. That's not just brave, that's revolutionary." Isabel laughed. "Revolutionary. Listen to us, acting like we changed the world by being friends. Maybe we did. In our own small way. Maybe every time someone chooses connection over convenience, humanity over hierarchy, they change the world a little bit. You're getting philosophical in your old age. I learned from the best." The door opened and Maddie appeared, her homework apparently finished. "Can we play cards? I'll let Isabel win at Go Fish." "You'll let me win?" Isabel pretended outrage. "I'll have you know I'm excellent at Go Fish." "You're terrible at Go Fish. You always forget which cards you asked for." "That's strategy." That's being bad at remembering. They moved inside to the kitchen table where they'd shared countless meals and conversations. The cards came out, and Maddie dealt with the serious concentration of a professional. The game was chaotic, filled with arguments about rules and accusations of cheating and laughter that made Ethan's chest ache with gratitude. This was what he'd tried to explain to the board. This simple, ordinary moment of three people playing cards on a Tuesday night. No agenda, no transaction, no calculation. Just connection. Just being human together in a world that made that harder than it should be. Isabel caught his eye across the table and smiled. Not the corporate smile, not the professional mask, just a real, genuine expression of joy and belonging. She'd found her way back to herself, Ethan realized. Not the person her father had wanted her to be, not the CEO the board demanded, but the person she actually was underneath all the expectations and armor. And he'd helped with that, just by being kind, by seeing her, by offering cheap tacos and terrible coffee and a friendship that asked nothing except that she show up as herself. Later that night, after Isabel had gone home and Maddie was asleep, Ethan stood in his kitchen washing the dishes from dinner. His phone buzzed with a text. Thank you for tonight, for every night, for proving that saving someone doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it just looks like friendship. He replied, You saved yourself. I just held the door open. Then thank you for holding the door and for not letting me pretend I didn't need it. Anytime. That's what friends are for. I'm starting to understand that, finally. Ethan set his phone aside and finished the dishes, thinking about that night at the gala when he'd watched a woman in red stumble and made the choice to step forward instead of looking away. It hadn't been a big decision, hadn't felt momentous or life-changing. Just one small choice in a long chain of choices that made up a life. But small choices mattered. Ethan had learned that from Sarah, had reinforced it raising Maddie, had proved it by helping Isabel remember her humanity. Every decision to be kind, to see people, to choose connection over convenience, they added up. They created ripples that spread farther than you could ever anticipate. He thought about Isabel alone in her glass house, probably looking out at the city lights, probably still learning how to live in the space between achievement and connection. She had a long journey ahead, years of unlearning old patterns and building new ones. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had a friend who would show up for Thursday coffee and Saturday adventures and Tuesday night card games, who would remind her, as many times as necessary, that she was more than her title. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The house settled into its nighttime quiet. Upstairs, Maddie dreamed whatever 9-year-olds dreamed about. Outside, Chicago hummed with its endless energy. And in his modest kitchen, in his modest house, Ethan finished the dishes and allowed himself to feel something rare and precious. Pride. Not for anything grand or dramatic, but for the simple fact that when someone needed help, he'd offered it. When someone needed a friend, he'd become one. When the world demanded that success and humanity be separate, he'd proved they could coexist. The woman in red had needed saving that night, but in the end, maybe they'd saved each other. She'd reminded him that new connections were possible after loss. He'd reminded her that success without humanity was hollow. Together, they'd built something neither could have built alone. A friendship that defied expectations and proved that kindness, in the end, was the most powerful thing there was. And the next morning, when his alarm went off and he started the familiar routine of single parenthood and corporate employment, Ethan did so knowing that his life was richer for having taken that risk, for having stepped forward when others looked away, for having seen a person instead of a position and offered help without expecting anything in return. Because that's what good people did. They showed up, they helped. They proved through small, ordinary actions that connection mattered more than convenience, that humanity mattered more than hierarchy, that sometimes the most revolutionary thing you could do was simply be a friend to someone who needed one. The story that had started with champagne and stumbling and a man with a glass of water had become something neither of them expected. Not a scandal, not a romance, but something more rare and valuable. A genuine friendship between two people learning to be human again, one Thursday coffee and one Saturday adventure at a time. And in a world that often felt cold and transactional, that was worth everything.